Welcome to a special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where I, Adam, am sitting down with one of our Patreon subscribers, Robert, who has generously become one of our patrons of Metallic Greatwyrm tier. And that means that he's able to sit down and record an episode with us, and he decided that today we're going to be discussing his homebrew setting, A Domain of Dread. But before we get started, let's get to know Robert a little bit. First of all, hello, Robert.
Hello.
Where are you from? What do you do? Tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm originally from a small town near Savannah, Georgia. Absolutely beautiful. If you ever get a chance to visit Savannah, I highly recommend it. If you can time travel, I would go back to 2018 because there was actually a nerd quarter there. There was a bar called the Chromatic Dragon, which I believe Tiamat was its inspiration, and it was amazing. Somebody turned a Baptist church into a gaming hall. They converted a community college into a maker space. It was amazing. COVID killed all that, so go and see where it was. But yeah, now I'm living just outside of Washington, D.C., and I have kind of a strange job. I am working for the Navy, Department of the Navy, where I work doing foreign military sales program of small combatants and unmanned systems. And small combatants means any warship 7,000 tons and down, which is an interesting definition of small. And prior to this job, I spent a little over a decade in the Navy as a surface warfare officer, and just a lot of weapon stuff. So if it's something that goes on a ship, comes out of the Navy and goes boom, or does something interesting, I've dabbled in it. So
we should have gotten Terry on this one because he was a tank mechanic in the British military. So you guys would have been able to compare notes on things while I sit here and just kind of nod. Dave is our other tactician. He didn't serve or anything, but he's very much a historian and a warfare buff. I know every year for Christmas he gets 10 books on actual like real warfare and history and a lot of ships recently. He was all about the Air Force for a while, and it's all naval stuff for a bit. So how did you start playing D&D? Was that before or during your service?
It was before. It was actually I managed to carbon date this one. It was June 12th, 1993.
Holy shit.
I got it down to the day. I could probably get it down to close to the hour, because it was the opening weekend of Jurassic Park. And
oh hell yeah, okay, I'm with you.
That was a good Saturday. I was visiting my cousins out in Colorado, and we went and saw Jurassic Park. Scared the shit out of me because I was 7 years old, and the raptors were scary, and I fell further in love with dinosaurs. And then we went back to their house and we played old school D&D, and I had no idea what was going on because I was 7 and our DM was 13. I just vaguely remember that the session ended with a critical roll that caused a castration of a cyclops, and that's kind of stuck with me. But, I kind of picked it back up in high school, right there at the edge of 3 and 3.5. Like, I bought the 3rd edition player's handbook, and I think 2 weeks later the 3.5 one came out. But played it a bit in high school with friends, a lot of homebrew stuff, nothing official. And then I played everything in high school. I played a little bit of Vampire the Masquerade, a little bit of Rage the Werewolf, Apocalypse, some of the Star Wars role-playing game, Mutants and Masterminds, L5R, Magic the Gathering, the 3rd edition Rokugan setting, and 40K. So not deep in any of those, big broad.
Which one's your favorite?
Out of that group, probably Mutants and Masterminds. It was really flexible on the flavor aspect, and the mechanics were very simple. So you really could be any kind of superpowered being you wanted. And then there's a system I really enjoyed, but it was just so clunky. It was called Imagine, which it was a high fantasy setting that was in the percentile die using the hundreds. But I'm not kidding. If you knew what you were doing, it took about 3.5 hours to make a character.
That's a bit intense. That feels like it was the early 2000s when everyone was going for more crunch and less flavor.
Yeah, it had hit point and armor statistics for each part of your body. It had skill lists that were insane. I mean, I don't think I'm joking when I say apiary and ventriloquism and kite making were individual skills in that game. So
But I love the attention to detail, and whoever wrote that was clearly passionate about it.
Yes,
but that's a bit deep.
But I will say it kind of broke ground because in the early 2000s, it was the first thing I saw where it was like, hey, it's not just human. We have hill humans, city humans, and blank. It created that kind of division in the lineages, we would say. And so you really got some interesting stuff out of it. But yeah, I'd say the 3 games I played at Mutants and Masterminds were probably the best.
That has been the one that I've always been curious to play, but I don't know anyone who's competent enough with it. I think Dan played it a decade ago. But I was a comic book nerd, right? I never read comics until I was like, God, 22, 23. And then I worked in a comic book store and fell in love with it. And I'm like, this sounds like my flavor, but learning a new system with nobody to guide you can be a little bit intense.
Right. And yeah, that one, again, pretty easy system, really flavorful. You could really come up with anything you wanted for your character, and there were mechanics to support it because it was very simple. But yeah, you're right. If there's nobody who has any experience with it, and I think it got shut down fairly quickly. I think there was a certain litigious group that decided they didn't want them using almost their IP for things. So
yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So when it comes to D&D, are you a forever DM? Do you play?
I was a forever DM for a long time. So in 2018, 2019, some close friends of mine from college started listening to various live action plays, or God, I'm losing the words, but the Adventure Zone, Critical Role, et cetera, et cetera. And they were looking for somebody to run games, and I was the only person they knew who even knew how to get a hold of dice. And so I ran some homebrew sessions with them. We switched into Storm King Thunder. We switched to Curse of Strahd, and we've made it through those. And then somehow that has spiraled into 2 or 3 groups, which has narrowed back down. We're back down to the 1. But one of my players graciously took up the mantle to get better at it. So literally Tuesday, we finished Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Cool.
And actually, my wife ran Wild Beyond the Witchlight, so I got to play in both of those, and that was a lot of fun. But it's really it's so hard to see brand new DMs and brand new players and keep my mouth shut and let them make their mistakes.
It's rough. I have trouble being a player these days. I need to have familiars and large spell lists and shit just to keep me occupied during other people's.
Right.
Playing L5R with Megan was a lot of fun because I was learning the system still, and playing Call of Cthulhu with Dan was a lot of fun because I didn't know the mechanics yet, so I was always looking through a book. But I can understand Jeff says the same thing. It is hard to be a player once you've DM'd. Which of the 4, you said Storm King Thunder, Curse of Strahd, Lost Mines, and Wild Beyond the Witchlight? Which one's your favorite out of them?
That's hard. I'm probably going to be the least popular person when I say Storm Kings.
That's interesting. Why? Because it gets so much flack online.
It gets so much flack online. I think it's weird. It's of the Lost Mines of Phandelver doesn't go high enough in the levels, and I know that it's designed to be the introductory, get you up to speed on D&D.
Yeah,
but it doesn't do that. It kind of bugs me that, okay, it'll get you up to speed on D&D by being a campaign from level 1 to 5, but it doesn't there's no tutorials in there. There's nothing instructing. In fact, a friend of mine and I got so fed up with it, we started a LLC where we are now producing tutorial documents for D&D that actually have here's 2 pages of notes for the DM on how to run a chase sequence with references to the book. Here's a tutorial moment. Stop everything. Pretend combat went bad. Go into death saves.
Yeah.
And God, I love Curse of Strahd. I really do love Curse of Strahd, but it's a love-hate relationship with me.
That book is messy.
It's the meme of the 3 parts of a horse drawing. The first one's all right, the middle one's photorealistic, and the last part's just garbage. And you can just feel they ran out of steam right in Valakai. Right after that, when it's like you're going to Kresk, oh, there's nothing in Kresk, don't worry about that. All right, you're going there, there's nothing there, don't worry about that. And I liked Storm King's Thunder because while it was a lot of work to do it, all of that work and all the material seemed to be, most of it was provided in the book. Whereas Curse of Strahd, I'm usually having to make up a lot of stuff. And if I were to re-homebrew it, which is actually what led to me doing my own Domain of Dread concept, was I double the size of it to make it make sense in my head.
I ran Curse of Strahd. I played through it, but it was very, very quick. I think we did the entire thing in 20 sessions, which was rapid.
Wow.
And but then I ran the first half of it for Mieka just one-on-one before every time that she goes away and she's down in Maryland for a number of months, we go back to Barovia and continue that storyline. So she's like warping in and out of Barovia. So I've gotten up to Valakai. My problem with it is that you're right, the geography doesn't make sense. It doesn't take long enough to get places. It's not oppressive enough. Just existing isn't hard.
Right.
It feels like you just hurry up and get to the next set piece, and then a lot of the set pieces aren't fleshed out. So,
and this will probably be the first of several small rants, but I'm fascinated by Curse of Strahd being the flagship, being the #1 seller for this, when it is the least D&D of all the settings I've seen. You have one uniform race essentially through the whole thing. Where are my dwarves? Where are my elves? Where are my goblins? Where's my stuff? You have one shop you can go to. You have one tavern you can go to. You can't have any hijinks. And when you really think about it, your party has no impetus whatsoever to do any side quests at all. It is get the fuck out of Barovia as fast as humanly, dwarvenly, elvenly possible. Oh, hey, can you go check this out? No, fuck that. I don't want to be here.
I think the reason why people like it is because it's familiar. You know Dracula before you sit down to play it, and that's what you're playing. And you can be a Goliath sorcerer if you want, sure. That's not why you're playing Curse of Strahd. You're playing it because romanticized vampires in a gothic setting.
Right.
And because it's simple touchstones, and 5th edition brought in so many new people that they needed familiar touchstones, because Phandelver, Waterdeep, Avernus, these don't mean anything to people, right?
Right.
However, the gothic setting with where there's one store to go to, there is the one damsel in distress for the whole thing. New players can understand those tropes and they can jump on it. So that's why I believe it's as popular as it is. And once you have figured it out and run it once, it's easy to run it a second time.
Yeah.
So
when you run it the second time, you've completely rewritten half of it.
Exactly. I think, again, Jeff has run probably 3, campaigns there, each one more radically different than the last. And the Curse of Strahd subreddit is just full of add this here, flip the gender there, add these flavors, here's new NPCs, look at this art, just because everyone is constantly homebrewing to make it make sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I used to be very active in that community. I've tailored off since. But you're right. The touchstones are very familiar, and it's very easy to comprehend. But if you're coming in from I listened to Critical Role, I listened to the Adventure Zone, I saw these high fantasy hijinks, you're not doing that. You're not seducing the barmaid, because then the locals are going to kill you, and you're not, mouthing off to the local lord because he's going to kill you. I mean, but yeah, no, I think I'm on my 3rd or 4th run on Curse of Strahd as well, and it's a great thing to start with. But if you tried to run it rules as written, it would be the most miserable campaign for a new player. Hey, you're on your 9th character, great, awesome.
And we ran into that. As a matter of fact, that campaign that we ran into, Terry was DMing. He wasn't supposed to DM. He found out that he was DMing a week ahead of time, when the other guy backed out and said, this is too much work, I don't want to do it. And then shortly thereafter, we lost 2 players, and everyone else looked at each other and said, let's hurry up and get the fuck through this as quickly as possible. So,
yeah, I mean, my players are the same. They just want to finish it so they can say they finished it. There's no side quests. There's no interest in doing anything. And no, it's same. So.
And we ran into the problem of, what does a barbarian do? We had our barbarian multi-class into sorcerer because you couldn't fucking hit anything, because everything's ghosts. Everything's got some resistant to the base level of damage that he's trying to do, right? And he's like, all right, fine.
Right.
Fuck it, here's
if I can just find that one magic item that'll let me hit him. Congratulations. There's no magic items.
Yeah.
There's like 3. I mean, there's plenty more, but yeah, it's and I mean, at the end of the day, it's not even a story about the characters. It's a story about the MacGuffin, because as you pointed out, hey, if you get the sword and the amulet to Ravenloft, it's fucking done. It's over.
Yeah.
And
there's nothing else to do there. So this is really interesting. I love that you are critical of Curse of Strahd, because so few people are. Everybody says they love it. I don't. I like it, but I don't love it.
I think I'm critical because it has the potential to be so much more, and it just feels like they didn't try at some parts, and they didn't bother to make some of it make sense. Why is there a death slot in the Amber Temple? I don't fucking know. They're neat. Yeah.
And I feel like Wizards of the Coast learned the wrong lessons from it. They said, hey, look how familiar or how popular this is, so we can just do more shit like this, streamline it and get it out as quickly as possible. And now we have the poorly fleshed out areas in half of the Ravenloft book is just look at all of these domains of dread with like there are 2 locations, 3 NPCs, and a feel, and that's it. There you go, right? And everything is like that. The Domains of Delight was a PDF that wasn't even included in the Feywild book, right?
And that was something I was going to touch on later, but this brings a very good touch point for it. Is when you read this book, and I'm sure there are others that feel the same, but I've really been delving into this in preparation for the episode. The chapters do not feel, I know they have multiple authors, but it doesn't feel like there was any attempt other than making sure the font was correct to actually create a uniformity across the flavor of the chapters.
I legitimately believe that the last time that they had a proper editor and like an editor-in-chief on a book was Icewind Dale. We haven't seen cohesion anywhere else.
I can believe that. And if you're listening to this and you have the Van Richten's Guide, I challenge you, take the creating a dread domain section that we're going to be discussing, where they talk about how to make a Dark Lord and how to make all of that, and then go through and look at the rest of the dread domains and see if they used their own rubric at all. Because I'll tell you, they fucking did.
No, what they did was they answered like one little question. They had like 3 details here, 3 details there, and say, and now you have enough information to go back to chapter 2 and build your own version of this, because we're not going to do it for you.
And I hope as we talk about it, we give a little inspiration and we kind of talk people out of what those chapters lean you toward. Kind of my earlier complaint about Barovia is you read this guide and you look at all of these domains of dread for any sort of guidance on what you should do. And while the domains are dissimilar enough to give you flavor, the Dark Lords, aside from a handful, are boring and uniform. They are all a fucking person. And I mean, you read it and this is a human being, all of them. And what did this person do? Killed a guy, killed his brother over a girl. This one killed somebody because they were mad. This one killed somebody out of confusion. And I go and I think, my God, every single character that's been in any one of my games would have been snatched up into a dark domain by now. Like when I ran Storm King's Thunder, that party lost an NPC to a stone giant. And so they committed genocide on the stone giants and felt they were justified in doing it. And so, okay, you're all in your own domain. There you go. No, that's enough. If killing one person gets you in, no, genocide, yep, you got your own. I mean, and so they could have done better.
I'm going to one-up you, and I know that it's part of the flavor and it's part of the lore, but I'm going to take it to another level. There are quote-unquote dark powers. I'm going to get into this in a second here when we actually launch into the Domains of Dread, but these dark powers that run the corner of the Shadowfell called Ravenloft are so poorly fucking defined that it's not even like, if they would give us, there are 13 shadowy figures, 7 of them are vaguely humanoid, 2 of those are vaguely masculine, and 3 are vaguely feminine, the others are androgynous. This one over here looks like it has 2 heads, and that one has tentacles sometimes when they appear, right? But none of them have names, and this one's made of shadow. And sure, give us something instead of just saying there are dark powers.
They meet once a century to discuss the new transgressions that would need to be caused to banish a Dark Lord. Something.
Like, who are these people? Like, who are these powers? And in my head, they're technically what? Undying warlock patrons? Great old ones?
Yeah.
Where do they sit in the power scale? Could they go toe to toe with Orcus? Or like where are we sitting with these guys? If they're powerful enough to take over Strahd,
yeah,
where are they? But then again, our players, are the same level when they're fighting Demogorgon in the end of Out of the Abyss as they are when they're fighting Strahd at the end of Curse of Strahd, and none of them are ever high level enough, and yet they're managing to do it anyway. So there's some problems with 5th edition. There's some problems with the balance and therefore the narrative.
5th edition decided that everything is going to end at level 12. Don't bother after that.
Yep. And I have been, okay, so when we started a podcast originally, Dan and I, before we before we ever talked to Terry about it, because Terry actually came to us and said, guys, you want to do a podcast? And Dan and I looked at each other like, we've been talking about this for 3 weeks. Yes. So, but before anything, we decided on a podcast because we wanted to build the cred to publish books. And the idea of just making PDFs and dropping them in DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG or wherever, or just sending them out for free on Reddit seemed like a lot of work for little payoff, and a podcast could, in theory, hit more ears and get us a little bit more talking about the concepts that we wanted to play with and see where we really sat with things. But we decided that we wanted to do 3 different kinds of books. One was a campaign setting, we'd build our own. One was like a how-to actually build a campaign setting of your own, which is what this book, The Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, is. How to build your own campaign setting. And it does a pretty good job at the details it says. It's just missing a bunch of details, right? And that's the problem, is all of these ideas are great, but they don't connect. There's no through thought, there's no oversight, right? And the last one was just going to be a bestiary, right? Where we're going to actually, as it stands right now, we have an artist sitting in the wings just drawing different kinds of mimics, because we wanted to release a book of mimics. And then I'm like, you know what? We're kind of banging the same drum for 120 pages. We should probably do something else.
So actually, your mimic episode inspired me for the mimic I put in here. I don't know if you saw it in the random encounter table.
Yeah.
I'm working on a one-shot murder mystery around that. So,
and I am all for a murder mystery, but you know what 5th edition doesn't do well? Murder mysteries.
Right.
There's no guidance, and that's the big complaint about the Dungeon Master's Guide, is that it doesn't teach, it shows, right? And this is why It's a Mimic has been successful, is because we look at what exists and say, all right, reverse engineer it. What are we getting out of this shit? Because there's precious little here.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, a friend of mine and I are doing the same thing without a podcast or any sort of platform whatsoever. And in the year of releasing, to be fair, only a handful of things on DM's Guild, we've made a staggering $54. So, but by the time this comes out, our next thing will be out, and hopefully maybe people will be more interested. But it's what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, tutorials on just how to do things, where to find things in the book, because the book is so fucking poorly put together. And whoever made the index for the books, they need to be dragged out in the street and shot. That drives me. Like, I'm not an organizational guy. I work very hard to be organized. You fucked up. You done fucked up on these. So
I am an organizational guy, is what I do for a living, and it's also what calms me. When I'm stressed out, I will sit down at the spreadsheet and reschedule next month's recordings. That calms me the fuck down. But
so I actually took that into account. So when I sent you the kind of a little bit of the write-up of my ideas, I sat there and said, okay, this makes sense to me, but I know Adam's an organization, make this organized. And like, there we go. So
I appreciate that, but I believe me, if I can run 3 years of a podcast with Dan, then I can sift through anybody's notes.
Well,
no, honestly, my favorite book in 5th edition is hands down the Eberron book, followed shortly by the Ravnica book. But as great as those are in some places, they are shit shows for where do you get the storyline of the campaign setting, the history of the world. And they do this in every one of the books. Here's a brief history. It's 7 pages long. By the way, we will sprinkle the rest of the details of everything you need to know as we go through the story. And they keep presenting every one of these books like they are a story, even the campaign settings, and not like these are tools for a dungeon master to use.
Right.
And so, I don't know, man, I guess it sells, so they like it, but
yeah. So if I played an Eberron campaign, that would be my favorite. Eberron's been my favorite setting since it came out. And in addition to this homebrew that I'm working on, I've got a bonkers West Marches time hopping anti-AI Eberron campaign.
That's fun. You're leaning into the
my mind, the Warforged, the Lord of Blades, in my idea, when he wants to end the war, no, he is an AI, and he doesn't want to end the war. He wants to ascend to be Primus, and he is going to break the fucking universe to try to do it. So
I love that. He should have a domain of dread.
Yeah. So many of the people in so many of these campaigns should be like, hey, stop that. No, here's your prison. And it's back to kind of the Dark Lords, and to kind of get back on it with it is, I know that when people are making Domains of Dread, they think, oh, I'm going to make something creepy and scary. And it's like, I got it. It is creepy and scary. This is a prison for a being that is so dangerous that otherworldly, god level creatures said, I don't need to just kill you because you might reincarnate. I need to take your thread completely out of the tapestry of fate and throw it over here in the scrap box by itself. And I've got a whole wall of scrap boxes to make sure you don't contaminate anything. And they shall do it.
Okay, so here we go. Here's what I posit. The quote-unquote dark powers, all of that is a veil. This is not official by any means. This is my own headcanon here.
Yeah.
All of that is just a veil to hide the fact that Mordenkainen, Bigby, the circle of 8 plus Elminster and a handful of others from around get together and say, all right, it's been 100 years. What asshole has stepped up? Let's knock him down again, right?
So you said you're a comic book guy. That's borderline Marvel Illuminati?
Yeah. Absolutely it is. And you can imagine that it will go just as poorly and hopefully have a World War Hulk come at the end of it. So.
But I will say this, looking at that and then looking at the ones they present, apparently none of them give a shit about dwarves. There's not a single fucking dwarf in Van Richten's. And I'm sure they've gotten up to some shit underneath the mountain.
I will tell you, there are precious few dwarves at all in 5th edition. Dwarves show up as like bartenders, miners, and then every once in a while you have an abandoned stronghold. Right. And other than that, it's Duragar.
And somehow the Dragonborn outnumber every other fucking race based on character or player picks. So yeah.
Anyway, we could go on a rant. The last thing. Okay, so here's my last question for you before we get off on this Domains of Dread tangent here, and do what we're supposed to do today. What's your favorite class and playable race?
So I said earlier, I'm a forever DM, but I'm really into the healer support class. That's where I enjoy being. I don't necessarily like being a life cleric. I like being some other form of support, and I'll admit I like to exploit those mechanics they didn't think about. So in my recent just ending Minds of Fendover game, I was playing the healer support as an artillerist artificer. I was a old church lady dwarf named Meemaw, who I think I made the cannon once the entire game. I was using that heal bot. I was keeping my party up. That thing was brutally overpowered. I took the chef feat so that I could maximize the short rests. And when I'm running a game, my players never think about healers. They don't. And so I need to give them a safety net for the first 3 or 4 levels. And so the sidekick or the DMPC is always a healer. My absolute favorite. I'm running him now in my Curse of Strahd game. I have a grung sidekick named Jub, who none of them can speak to him because he's a fucking grung. Nobody speaks grung, but he is the party's healer. And being that he's a grung, he's going to cast Cure Wounds, make a Constitution saving throw because you're being healed, but you're also being poisoned.
Yeah,
I love it. It's just hilarious to see them way out in their head. How much do I need those hit points right now? So I'm big into the healer, but I mean, just anything interesting. I think my next character is going to be a wild magic barbarian who thinks he's a warlock, but he's just so fucking dumb.
I just got rid of my wild magic barbarian that Dave was playing it, and it was a lot of fun. It was absolutely wild.
Yeah.
But no, I'm with you for the healer. My longest living character that I have played in the last decade was a dwarven life cleric, and I got so much out of that. So,
yeah.
So I feel that as a DM, although honestly, if I were to play now, it would be a bard just for the support spells.
So,
bard or druid.
Yeah, no, I before Mima, I was a bard, and I was a College of Eloquence bard, and we realized that when you have an automatic 18 or higher on persuasion and deception checks, you've broken the fucking game.
Yes.
And so I had to give him up, but he was I think I mentioned it on the Discord. He was not a performer or a singer or a musician. He was a newscaster bard.
Yeah.
And so I went in as this, just super stereotypical, like the Family Guy news anchor. And he was a shit ton of fun. But yet so wildly powerful. Like bards are just so incredibly powerful.
I have 3 out of my 6 players have taken levels in Bard now. Holy shit.
Yeah, no, a couple of levels Bard and then Life Cleric, and then you're talking about your short rests are your max hit points back every time. I mean, it's just it would be an incredible support class, and as a DM, I would absolutely hate that person, and they would be the target of every single fucking attack. Like, oh, you're the one keeping everybody alive. Yeah. So.
Well, again, I just got rid of my Twilight Cleric for exactly the same thing, right? Like, yeah. It was not on purpose. I covered all that in the False Hydra episodes, right? But like,
love those episodes, honestly.
Good, because it was me ranting into the mic.
Yeah, no, I can imagine your face just getting redder and redder. I think I was actually mentioned on one when you were talking about when they cut down the bell. I had to turn the podcast off because I was so angry about that. Oh my god, my players have done so many things just like that.
We ended the session with Dan saying, "Can I catch the bell? I'm a furbolg. My strength counts as a size category larger." And I looked at him. I said, "No." He goes, "But how much does the bell weigh?" "Too much, Dan. Everybody go home. I'm done with you. We're going to take a break. I need to figure out what to do now."
It's you seen Tim Burton's Batman? It's that fucking bell. You're not catching.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into speaking of Tim Burton's Batman. Let's talk about Domains of Dread.
Yes,
because that is a setting I would absolutely fucking play in.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. You want to talk about a celebrity DM that would blow your fucking mind? I would put Tim Burton and then Jim Carrey. But I think Jim Carrey would be scarier. He would be terrifying.
I think so. Honestly, the one that I would, not the person to run the game, but the person to build the world. I want Guillermo del Toro to give me a campaign setting.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I love Hellboy, and I love what he did with. No, that was Robert Rodriguez. Wait, no, that was del Toro. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was del Toro. Robert Rodriguez. He was in. No, he did Sin City.
Yes. Yeah, but del Toro doing a Feywilds would be
wild. I mean, that's what Pan's Labyrinth was, and how dark was that? That was
great. Yes. And did it happen? Did it not? All right. Okay. So yeah.
All right. So Domains of Dread. For those of you who are listening who've been confused about what the fuck are these guys talking about, in and among the rants of what books suck, the Domains of Dread breaks down kind of like this. The Shadowfell is a mirror plane. It is a nigh infinite plane of existence that is a dark reflection of the material plane, but there's one corner of it that is shrouded in mists. And in some places, the mists part, and there are small pockets of absolute misery within. I want you to know that this took me 2 Shadowfell episodes and about an hour and a half of prep to parse this down into something bullet point that they should have just done at the beginning of this damn book. But anyway.
Yeah.
So in the Shadowfell live these nigh eternal creatures known only as the Dark Powers, which we've already spoken about in this episode, that are just very generic. They exist out there. We don't know how many or what they look like or who they are, but they have passed judgment on beings of cruelty, misery, and anguish, and have trapped them all in infinite loops within prisons, which is what these clearings in the mists are. Strahd von Zarevic is the first such prisoner, but there are now countless others. It literally says countless in the book. So this corner of the Shadowfell is infinitely large as well. These prisoners themselves are called Dark Lords. So we have Dark Powers and Dark Lords. But here's the thing. The Dark Lords that are tormented in eternal horror and despair, they don't realize that they're prisoners or that they're stuck in infinite loops. This isn't like Groundhog Day. They're just living every day like it's the first day. And those prisons that they're stuck in are the size of kingdoms and countries and whole geographical landscapes, and they are each suited to the nature of the Dark Lord, acting as a reflection of the Dark Lord themselves. These prisons are called Domains of Dread, and that's what we're talking about today. But the worst part is, and this is why I don't think necessarily that the Dark Powers are benevolent, the Dark Lords aren't alone. When the Domains of Dread are created, other innocent souls are pulled into the realm and they live terrified and macabre versions of normal life under the influence of the Dark Lord that they're imprisoned with. Some people can enter these Domains of Dread, but it's a lot easier to enter than it is to escape. Entering the mists to leave will probably drive you mad and definitely get you lost. The Dark Lords don't want to see you escape their realms of influence, and the Dark Powers that oversee everything take a somewhat more passive role in keeping you in the realms by setting the environment against you to keep you there. So let's talk about Dark Lords for a second, because according to the book, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the first thing you need to do when creating a domain of dread is understand your Dark Lord. It's their memories, their wants and needs, their flaws and misdeeds that influence the nature of the realm. The book recommends that you set the Dark Lord up to be a twisted reflection of the party members. For example, if one character loves high society and formal balls, then the Dark Lord twists and exaggerates that for him or herself, holding long daily courts and punishing anyone who does not follow etiquette perfectly, even at the nightly parties that are mandatory to attend. It's just shit like that. So if they love to drink, then the Dark Lord has alcoholism be rampant. If they love to have gladiatorial combat to prove their might, well, then it's a battle to the death, then horrible body shit happens to people. And we have, even the survivors are amputees, and the realm is full of them. Like, it's brutal, twisted, and the more intense, the better. So while the book itself is very lacking in a lot of different ways, they do have some great questions in the book to kind of jog memory and give a little bit of inspiration for people. When it comes to creating a Dark Lord, they want you to look at the past life of the Dark Lord. So here are the questions they ask. Where was the Dark Lord before the mists took them? Who was the Dark Lord's family? How was the Dark Lord's family oppressed, oppressive, or both? What was their childhood like? Whom did they care about? Who cared about them? Who hurt them? Who respects or loves them? And whose respect and love do they crave? What do they value? These are very important motivations, not just for Dark Lords, but for literally every character, for literally everything that you would ever write. If you are looking to write a novel, these are great questions to ask. If you're looking to build a D&D character, these are great questions to ask. This should be part of character creation. So then it says that you should give them an ideal, which is essentially just an unflinching line that they will not cross. Under no circumstances will I allow anyone to blank, whatever that is, right? So that's what their ideal should be. Their bond, which is what or who they want, and their flaw, which is what negative emotion or destructive behavior always undermines their goals. You don't have to write paragraphs for this. In fact, simpler is better, because when you have broad overarching sentences, just say like always or never, this gives you the rigidity needed to create a Dark Lord. So there is a D10 table of fatal flaws on page 40 of the book. Do you have a D10 there, Robert? We can roll it and see what we come up with, just as an example.
I do. I have rolled 2.
2. Others' concerns bore me, and I would rather have my lessers handle everything possible. I like that. That's really flavorful. I could make a dozen characters based off that would all be wildly different. The random tables are fun, but it doesn't tell you why they chose these things to be included in the random table.
Yeah, so they need to elaborate on why that's a flaw.
Yes. And this is the problem, is they give you kind of one paragraph about it, but it's like 3 sentences, and then a bunch of examples, and they leave it up to you to kind of reverse engineer it.
So depending on the person, they won't see that as a flaw.
No. There are people in my life that wouldn't see that as a flaw.
Middle managers.
The other thing is that you should remember that the dark powers consider that these Dark Lords are corrupted beyond redemption. And this is a big theme here. So what evil deeds has your Dark Lord committed? When fleshing out the victims of these deeds, you have to make them sympathetic, tragic, and heartbreaking. And remember that the Dark Lord will never, ever, ever redeem themselves or show real regret. They may feel self-pity, but they will not regret the actions they did and how it impacted other people. The questions that they ask in the book for this, which help kind of give you a direction to head in. But again, this is their version of explaining. I think they're using these lists as a way to say, hey, this is how you do it, but they never get into why. And that's the problem. So what was the first depraved act that the Dark Lord chose to commit, and how did their ideal encourage them down this path? Was the Dark Lord rewarded or celebrated for their evil? Did that reaction encourage greater crimes? Were these rewards earned or justified? Did the Dark Lord repeat or escalate their wickedness to obtain something they selfishly desire? And there are 4 more beyond that. The most important one for me is when and how did these acts attract the attention of the dark powers? Well, for fuck's sakes, tell us who the dark powers are, and I might be able to give you that answer. So, in order to make a Dark Lord feel legendary, they have to be supernatural somehow. There needs to be a physical or magical trait that they have that reflects their evil. And this was your complaint a little while ago, Robert, was the fact that they're all just people. They're all just like humans or close enough to it that it's very easy to understand what's happening. Instead of all of the other wild amount of creatures that exist across all of the different books that we just didn't bother to get into, right? The majority of the Dark Lords presented in this book are just humans. So they do give us a D10 monstrous transformation table on page 41. We want to roll another D10 and see what kind of weird monstrous transformation that we can come up with.
I rolled 1, which actually Dark Lord loses their voice. Their words now carve themselves on their skin as lingering scars.
That's really cool and really flavorful. When am I going to use that? Why is that a monstrous transformation that reflects who they are and the deeds that they committed?
It's not, and it's a little bit creepy, and it's a little bit body horror, and overlapping scars, and they're speaking, and you got to make your perception rolls to see what they're saying, and maybe it's a different language. I could see maybe if you fed that back into the fatal flaws of I let my lessers handle everything, and then that creates that level of interpretation and confusion there. But that's a level of synergy between these two tables that I don't believe the authors intended.
Yeah, well, clearly these random tables, I feel like they were each created by somebody else. Maybe 2 or 3 people wrote a couple of entries and threw it at the wall just to have variety, which is great. But again, you need to explain to us, the DMs, why we give a shit about this, right? It's interesting because reading the paragraph for monstrous transformations, it says they have features that make them similar to familiar monsters. Just make them monsters. I don't know why we took all these extra steps to make them humanoids.
It says every single one they show, they say, "Oh, this is statistics of a ghost, statistics of a mummy lord, statistics of creature in monster manual." All right,
just make them that, right?
Yeah.
And so the other thing about it here, which is weird because they litter this through the text all the way through, but it's never brought up and it's counter to the lore, is it says maybe they even gain supernatural abilities via a pact with the dark powers or upon arriving in their domain. What pact are they making with the dark powers that don't know the dark powers exist? That's in the lore. So like this is where there's no real oversight here.
Yeah.
So upon completion of this irredeemable act that they've got to do, the mist surrounds the Dark Lord and drags them into the Shadowfell along with their surroundings and the denizens of those surroundings. That's in the lore. Everything gets twisted and corrupted, and the loop begins without anyone having any recollection of the fact that this isn't how life is supposed to be. So you could talk about pacts all you want, but they're not going to remember that they even made a pact if they did in the first place. I would just strike that out for the most part. It feels like it's somebody had a really cool idea that didn't make it, and then they forgot to edit it out.
There was a whiteboard, 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall, and everybody wrote all their cool ideas on it. And somebody went through and said, "Okay, where can I put this? I don't know. It goes here. All right, fine. Fuck it. Whatever."
A lot of the time, I feel like it was just copied and pasted out of an email chain, right? So let's jump into the domains themselves now, because this is honestly, I like making a bad guy. Villains are fun, but I'm all about the domain, and that's why we're here today. Each domain of dread serves 2 narrative purposes: echo the irredeemable act forever and ever, and provide eternal suffering. The place of the deed should be present within the domain of dread, and there should be details and reflection of it littered throughout the land. So if it takes place on a battlefield or in a back room of a bar or wherever, that location has to be within the domain of dread. But that feeling of the battlefield should be everywhere. That back room should be everywhere. The smell of it, the taste of the air on your lips, what colors, how bright is it, who's there, how are they breathing, does everyone else have to breathe in this manner now when they get upset? There's a long list of questions, and they're actually pretty good. What does the act sound like from a distance or to someone in the next room? And then you would have that echo throughout the land, or you would hear it over and over again as clues to what happened. Are words spoken? Are they relevant to the scene, or they're unrelated? And would you see or hear those words over and over again throughout the domain? Before the unfortunate scene happens, what warnings were missed or foreshadowed? And will they still be there? Right? These are all really cool ideas. And there's a whole lot more here, like shapes and symbols, what smells. Does the light or darkness hide or reveal anything? There's a bunch of shit here. It's pretty good. It's how I would look at this for building a murder mystery as well.
Yes,
right? And using foreshadowing maybe if I know it's going to be mediums or anything. Remember, for the eternal suffering part, it's based essentially upon 6 basic tenets. The first one is anyone who dies in the domain is reincarnated there, doomed to repeat the cycle. The second one is the Dark Lord is actively trying to corrupt another to follow in their footsteps or to understand and sympathize with them, but no matter what, it will never work. It's doomed to fail. The third one is echoes of past tragedies are always raining down upon the Dark Lord, keeping them in a foul mood and making them feel like everything is about to spiral out of their control. This makes them secretly desperate. The fourth one is the Dark Lord will never learn from his or her mistakes. The fifth is there's a symbolism and metaphor everywhere as constant reminders of the past and the irredeemable act. And the last one is the bond, that thing that they want most, is always near, but they will never get it. For Curse of Strahd, for example, spoiler alert, that's Irina, right? Always there, and he can never get it. When it comes to the domain itself, specificity is the key. Create a number of specific locations, populate these locations with memorable, fleshed-out NPCs who are in the midst of their own struggles, but most importantly then, normalize it. So all of the citizens trapped in the domain of dread think that the whole thing is absolutely normal and nothing is out of the ordinary. For example, yes, the bloody handprint that appears on the windows every night at exactly 3:13 a.m. are terrifying and no one wants to talk about them. And everyone is scared and they get a cold shiver down their back. But everyone knows they're there. They've always been there. And no one thinks to ever wonder why or maybe how to stop it. They just know that that is the thing that happens and they move on. When it comes to, I think the best example of that in Curse of Strahd, like right at the top of my head, is those meat pies.
Yeah. Yeah. For people listening, spoiler alerts for Curse of Strahd. Probably.
Yes. Yeah. When it comes to cultural specifics, the book asks a few pointed questions, and I like them. It's a good place to start if you're going to create any sort of village or civilization. What does the culture fear? What do they consider taboo? What is scarce, and how do inhabitants compensate for the scarcity? Who or what does the culture inflict harm upon? How does the culture treat outsiders? What values does the culture hold that not everyone abides by? How is the culture exaggerated, a parody, or otherwise unrealistic? How does it prevent change? And how does everyone else feel about the Dark Lord? Focus on the human drama parts of the domain and not the nitty-gritty details when coming up with this shit. For example, it doesn't matter what the specific wording of the old treaty says. It just matters that the neighboring towns hate each other for breaking the treaty, which no one seems to have read. Emotion overrides logic in Ravenloft. Make sure that you fill the area with monsters and creatures besides humanoids. Remember, the name of the game here is horror. And as much as we have giant swaths of this book and sections based on the horror, they don't seem to really dig into it besides 2 or 3 examples, and then they move on. We have books full of monsters. Lean into that shit. And then, of course, we have my favorite aspect of the whole damn thing, which is the mists themselves. Flavor the mists to work in favor of the domain of dread. What shapes, sounds, and smells appear within the mists? Do the mists behave in some predictable way? What stories do these domains' people ascribe to the mists? Do they ascribe a personality to them, or do they even acknowledge them at all? Where do the mists appear beside the domain's borders? How does a Dark Lord use the mists to close their domain's borders? And this one annoys me because it shouldn't be the Dark Lord that does that. It should be the Dark Powers.
Yes.
So, and that pretty much brings us to everything that you need to know about developing a domain of dread. So we've done the Dark Lord and the domain, but there's still a little bit more, and that is the idea of putting adventures in it now. And this is where the whole fucking thing falls apart in this book. There are a couple of bullet points I pulled out of it, but honestly, the gaps are way bigger than the details that they've given us. So they do say, have a time-sensitive plot hook to drag the party into the machinations of the domain of dread. I'm sorry, do that for every campaign you do. That should be literally every session. Have plot hooks. Making it time sensitive is just a really good tool. You should build evocative and extreme locations. We are playing a fantasy game. This is not 1920s Cthulhu. They should always be evocative and extreme. There should be fantasy somewhere, littered throughout. Populate the area with the Dark Lord's enemies, allies, and victims. This is no-brainer to me. Everyone should have an opinion of the Dark Lord, even if they don't say it out loud. For set-piece NPCs, give them details, emotions, or intentions that are unmistakable and intense. You want them to be remembered. You don't want them to blend into the background. Eventually, have the Dark Lord take an interest in the party. This feels like a balancing act that every DM is going to have to do differently depending on the party makeup, the Dark Lord, the domain itself, the other citizens, what the Dark Lord wants, what's the immediate threat, what's the plot. There's so much behind that. And they give us a D8 table on page 44, and that's it.
And to interject there, if you go on the Curse of Strahd subreddit, I would say a surprising number of them of the posts there are going to be either, when do I introduce Strahd?
Yep.
Because if you run that book, rules as written, and your party takes the certain paths, they will meet him for the first time when they're there to kill him. Just open the book. And then you get a one throwaway line of, he might invite them to dinner. Oh, great. This is an amazing set piece. This is an amazing thing. We're going to have them to dinner. And then you flip to that section of the book, and it's 2 fucking sentences, and there's nothing about it.
It doesn't get much better in Ravenloft either, right? No. In the book, Ben Richton's Guide to Ravenloft. Here, do you have a D8 there, Robert? Do you want to roll on the Dark Lord connections table?
That would be a 3, a natural 3. Dark Lord and an adventurer share camaraderie over a mutual ideal.
That is so fucking vague. It might as well be in a fortune cookie.
The Dark Lord needs to have already met them or done some sort of research and even know who the fuck they are. I mean,
yeah, that's not a connection. That's the outcome of an encounter, right?
Yeah,
like you're not giving me anything new with this. But we also have Dark Lord interactions on page 45, which is another D8 table. If you want to roll again.
A 5, the Dark Lord meets the adventurers at a public market, festival, temple, or library surrounded by a crowd of innocents.
Sure, I could fucking write that. That's like, why is this taking up pages in the book, right? And there's a lot of that shit in here.
Yeah. They meet them there, and then what?
Exactly. Why are they there? What do they want? So and here's the thing, and I get that it's got to be a little bit vague, because God knows, even when you know who the players are and you know what the character builds are, they are hard to predict. So I understand that you've got this limitation when you're trying to write a book like this, but you have got to give us more than that shit, right? So
and on that, I feel like this book puts too much on the characters.
Yeah, hands down.
Yeah.
And they leave it up to the DM to be almost reactionary. Like, you build a set and then you let the players come in and stomp their feet and wreck house, and then you end it, and that's it. And which actually brings us to the last bit. Finally, how does a cycle end in a victory for the players? What do they need to escape? Do they need to defeat the Dark Lord? Is escape the end, or is it just the next step? So it asks a bunch more questions. Can the Dark Lord die permanently? We already know the answer to that. The answer is no. It's an infinite loop. So under what circumstances might they return? It's an infinite loop. Dawn the next day, or give them 2 months of peace and then they return. Like Sauron, right, in Lord of the Rings. We can feel the evil building and then boof, he's there again. Does a new Dark Lord rise? No, it would be a different fucking domain of dread if it was a new Dark Lord. Does the domain permanently dissolve? That's up to the dark powers, not your players. Right.
And honestly, you actually asked a question so you said, what do the players need to do to win?
Yeah.
And the book actually, if you start parsing it of players versus characters, characters winning is them just getting out.
Yep.
The players winning is, and they achieved something. And that's probably one of the top complaints with Curse of Strahd is, hey, you did it, you killed him. It's not permanent. He's back tomorrow. You just had however many weeks of fucking misery for whatever reason. Enjoy your PTSD and you're back in wherever. So I think that's actually what they should have done here is they should have said, hey, define victory for your players.
Yep.
And then use your characters to facilitate that victory so that you have a fulfilling narrative.
I honestly believe that if you're going to do a Dread domain, it is a great act of your 3-act play, which is your entire storyline for your campaign, right? And believe me when I say, I think it's freaking phenomenal, and it should be. It's massive, memorable, multi-session, lasts over a year in real time, like location and set piece, and it's so much fun to do this. However, it can't be the be all and end all. That's where Curse of Strahd fell apart, because we finished it, looked at each other, and said, "Now what?"
Right.
And like even like I've run Death House and I've run House of Lament now, and everybody looks at me and says, "Is it sorry? So we're in Barovia now?"
Yeah.
Was that the intro? Like, there's no fluidity, there's no continuity there, right? It's just a neat thing. Death House should be a set piece that you just have to do in Curse of Strahd instead of the intro.
Yes, and I think in this book they should have given you 2 pages, maybe. I'll admit I have not cover to cover read the book recently, but they should have given you 2-3 pages of how to use a Domain of Dread as a tool in your campaign.
Yeah,
put the fucking MacGuffin here. Oh, you need the obsidian blade of Karatouche to kill that thing, and it was last seen in the hands of so and so, and he disappeared in the mists, but nobody knows. Oh, ask that guy. And then you're there for a tier, you go through all your bullshit, you get the thing, and you come out because, hey, it's a great tool for that. But level 1 to 10, level 1 to 20, if you're truly playing the horror aspect, fuck, it's a grind, and your players don't want to be there anymore.
I ran my last campaign, they started off at level 12 and they went to level 20 of essentially a dark domain. I didn't call it that, but the idea here is that the goddess of death is coming in and just totally fucking up this. It was a jungle riverland that's got these heavy obscuring mists, and it was pirates in the mists and floating cities, but everything undead is rising, and it was a freaking grind. The dark fantasy section in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft I find is so vague and generic, it's not useful. It describes literally every sort of dark or evil kind of setting or scenario. However, my guys just lived through that. They did it for a year and a half, and they turned to me afterwards and said, "That was a fucking grind. I don't want to do it again. We need to be heroes now." Right. And so it's like that's sorry, it's just exactly what you said. It's a great place to visit. I wouldn't want to live there.
No, I don't want to live in Baltimore. But sorry if anybody lives in Baltimore, but that town is awful to me. Anyways, it's a great piece. It's a great thing to work in, and it is so difficult to balance horror where you are scaring the characters but engaging the players. And a lot of the horrors that we see presented in the book are not actually horror, it's extreme discomfort. It's things they don't want to see. It's anxiety. I don't mind being scared. I don't want to be anxious for 3, 5, 8 hours for 30 fucking sessions.
Honestly, I think about it's a difference between watching. There are a lot of good horror movies out there, and I love the horror genre. There are a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, but there are different genres of horror movies, and some of the ones that are really, really good that people tout as being just the best, the pinnacle of, whether it's It Follows or The Exorcist or The Babadook, these are just anxiety inducing, holding your breath for 2 hours, and they ramp it up. And I get the same emotional reaction from Requiem for a Dream or Uncut Gems or anything else. And it's a different feel than actual legitimate horror. And we call it psychological horror or metaphorical horror, but it's the same thing. You can't live there for too long.
It's body horror. This is torture porn. That's all it is.
Yeah. And body horror is The Fly. The Fly is body horror, right? It's not Saw. Saw is torture porn.
I thought, hey, real quick, what's your top 3 horror? I'm not gonna ask you what your number 1 is. What's your top 3 if you had to guess?
It depends on my damn mood. Honestly, right now my top 3 horror would be The Exorcist always reigns supreme for me. The 90s miniseries It with Tim Curry was a seminal moment in my life. I did not see part 2 and didn't know part 2 existed for about 3 or 4 years. So I thought that the clown just fucking won. Like,
Yeah.
that was a rough one for me. So here's my outside of the box answer. I low key love the movie Mama, which was
Yeah.
not a horror movie in a traditional sense. I consider it to be a dark fairy tale.
Yes. Yes.
So
Agreed. Very, very well done too. Incredibly well done.
Look, I loved It Follows. I've got a
Yeah.
special hatred for The Conjuring and the Insidious and Sinister movies. Like, I'm not wild on ghost stories and haunted houses.
Yeah.
But man, 13 Ghosts came out when I was like 15 or something, and I ate the shit out of that when that came out. Like,
yes, God, I watched that about 2 weeks ago. Love that film. And that film did not do credit to the lore that went into that film. Like reading all the stories and going into like that ancient fucking Netscaper GeoCities website and finding, oh, these are who these ghosts are. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah.
Like, I low-key love the Blair Witch Project, and I know that that's a controversial take these days, but like, I think that was a beautifully crafted with almost no lore. They made you desperate for more the entire movie, and then left you just gut punched at the end of it.
Please explain it, because if you do that, it'll make it okay. If you don't do that, I don't know what happened, and that's the fear for me.
Well, that's why the first Alien movie was, in my opinion, so great, and Aliens was such a piece of shit. And again, I'm probably alone in this. I'm just on record as hating James Cameron, and I've got my reasons.
I think we've actually had that back and forth on the Discord.
Probably. I will rant about that at every opportunity. Yeah. James Cameron is a cinematographer and a shit director. I love what he's done for the technology of filmmaking. I will not watch Avatar movies.
I mean, if you've seen Fern Gully, you've seen the best Avatar. And Fern Gully was untouchable. That's fucking perfect. I mean,
absolutely. Robin Williams is, yes, that movie was, anyway. And it's not just that, it's Dances with Wolves, right? It's the same story there. It's Pocahontas. I'm done. James Cameron has not had an original thought in his brain except, how can I make this camera do this thing in this interesting way? And I appreciate that. Or look at this cool Titanic shit, and I'm all about that too. So
fair.
Anyway.
Domain of Dread.
Yeah, back to this. So we've got, when we started talking about your Domain of Dread, you sent me a document, and it had in it kind of what are the horror genres that you are most intrigued by, or that your Domain of Dread is going to lean into. Just spoiler alert, you've done a lot of the legwork on this already, and you're just like fleshing out the final details here. But you said dark fantasy with a little bit of body horror, a little bit of folk horror, and a little bit of ghost stories.
Yeah.
I then went and I looked up all of the different entries, and I read through them very, very carefully in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft for dark fantasy, body horror, folk horror, and ghost stories. I have to say, I appreciate folk horror getting its own category. Unfortunately, it was very, very weak. All of these entries are. They burned a couple of pages on almost nothing, just like random tables of shit that you might do in here. But if you're going to do cosmic horror or psychological horror or slasher horror, you already know the shit that they're telling you in this book, right? So,
and they really should have put dark fantasy at the very end and said every fucking thing else.
Yeah.
Catch all. By the way, that's going to be all the ones you do, basically. So
honestly, I can't think of a single Domain of Dread in this book that is not at least half dark fantasy. That's what we're playing D&D. It's dark fantasy.
Yes.
Right? So anyway, I remember doing the legend lore for this book and being super excited about it. And I do love the bestiary at the end of it. I think it's great.
No.
The entries they gave us were worth the price tag on the book for me. I have gotten so much out of those. However, and the House of Lament, weirdly fun. And you can run it 3 different times, 3 different ways, and that's good too. So, however, this section is essentially garbage. It's the same thing as the Spelljammer ships, right? Like, it's just, I don't know why they bothered to waste this many pages on this shit when they could have.
We could do the rest of this. I could go until dawn on my problems with Spelljammer. And again, I'm a ship guy. I've spent years of my life on a ship. Every fucking ship in here is the same. It drives me crazy. Yeah,
except for the shape of it, they are the same.
They all have crossbows. They all have little shitty catapults. Cool. My Mind Flayer is using a crossbow.
the first time we ever met Mind Flayers in 5th edition, you get a laser gun. Or no, not in 5th edition, in D&D, like original D&D. You get a laser gun. Like,
where's my ship-mounted cannon of magic missile to fuck that guy up at a distance? Okay, anyways, yeah. Domains of Dread.
Anyway, Domains of Dread. So now we have context on how to build a Dark Lord, a Domain of Dread, and an adventure within it. Let's talk about yours. Give us a breakdown of what your Domain of Dread looks like. Who's your Dark Lord? Do you want to go through the Dark Lord first or the Domain first? Because the two of them are pretty symbiotic. Like, you could start from either end of this, right? You could either, I think you could build a really cool domain and then construct a Dark Lord to fit it.
Yeah.
Or you could do it the way that they say in the book.
I think the first is better. I think creating the domain. And I say that because if you go by the way the book is, I honestly, I hate the way they start with Dark Reflections, because it starts with look at your characters and create reflections of that. And
what if we don't know who the characters are?
You're starting a level 1 campaign. They have no fucking clue who these characters are.
Yep.
How am I creating a reflection of them? And, you know, I've gotten one person who's given me 3 pages of backstory. I've gotten one who's given me 30 pages of backstory. I have one who says, my character doesn't have a memory. They like hitting things. Fucking cool. How am I creating a reflection of that? And then, this is my bigger concern with that, is a lot of players put some aspect of themselves into their character. Yeah. I want to be this person. I feel like this is who I am. I want this to be the exemplar of my positive attributes. And then to take, as they say, and create a dark reflection of that and show how it can be villainous could be a very painful thing for that player, and they could feel called out. And so I think you should make your Dark Lord and your world agnostic of the characters. And
I agree with you 100%, except if at the end of Curse of Strahd, when you're all said and done, and the thing that you needed to get was, you thought it was all about Strahd? No, it was the Sword of Cass, right? So now you've got that, and you move on to Vecna's Dark Domain for levels 12 to 20. Yeah. Then you've spent all this time with the characters up until now. You can kind of hand pick what to do. So if your dark domain that you're making yourself is a reflection of the characters that you've been with for the last 2 years, that makes sense.
Absolutely. But how many people are playing that?
No one is doing that. That, like, right. I have to justify it by saying that's the only way it will make sense, and no one is doing that shit.
And especially with the Dread domain, something I do every time I run Curse of Strahd, literally every game I run, I've got a little note card, and it says, number 1, this is supposed to be fun. So I have to remind myself, hey, it's a horror setting and it's terrible. It's supposed to be a game. Make it fun. Mm-hmm. And 2 is, where do I introduce every single backup character when these dumb motherfuckers cause a TPK? And so I have a list of, like, every single chapter, I've got 2 spots for introducing backup characters in a narratively satisfying way. So I just made my Dark Lord as a reflection of all your level 1 characters. Great. They all died at level 2 because they were idiots. Great. Now I'm going to change them. So I said, screw that. I'm not doing any of that. And back to my earlier rant about they're all people. And I hate that, because apparently a human being in 20 years of life can do something so bad they've got to be separated, but a dragon in a millennia can't. A dwarf in hundreds of years can't. An aboleth has never done it. Like, where are they? Where's my Kraken Dark Lord? Mm-hmm. And like a lot of people, you know, I like my dragons, and I really love my dragon turtles. And I said, fuck it, I'm going to make my Dragon Lord, or my Dark Lord, a ancient dragon turtle, because that's somebody who's had enough time to get up to some dark shit and have lost perspective on morality, convinced that they are the hero doing the only thing right. And so everything justifies that.
Did you have access to Fizzbands when you were doing this?
I did.
Yep.
I did, and I used the table in it. And the table actually gave me 2 really good pieces of really good pieces of inspiration. One was for the ancient dragon turtle. They have been tasked to keep a kraken asleep.
I love that.
And the other was they are under a geas to carry the fortress of a lich, which plays into the name I picked for my Dark Lord, incidentally and surprisingly to me. But my Dark Lord, it originally was named Tai Feng, And I'm going to butcher every name in here because they are not of English origin, and also I am not extremely literate. So,
Sure.
Tai Feng is, I believe, Mandarin for typhoon, and that seemed like a good name for a dragon turtle. Big event at sea.
Man, I love that. There's some synergy there that is just beautiful.
Wait for it. It actually gets better, and it surprised me when it happened by accident. So Tai Feng is my dragon turtle, and after keeping a certain patch of water safe and kind of falling in love with this piece of the ocean, she was tasked by the goddess of the sea to keep a kraken asleep. I mentioned before we started recording, I have a 4-month-old who does not like to sleep.
Yep.
I don't know how you actively keep something asleep.
Magic. The only answer is magic or some hardcore sedatives.
Yes. And that baby is very sedative resistant. I can tell you that. And the veterinarians around here started asking me questions. But so, and in a combination of, if you're trying to keep something asleep, you're not sleeping, you're awake.
Yep.
Doing this, and that creates a level of paranoia. So I imagine an ancient dragon turtle who's been tasked with doing this and spending hundreds of years doing it in the vagary of keep this kraken asleep. All right, in the first few years, okay, everything's calm, everything's chill, and then I have no idea what's going to wake this up. And so now I've got to start stopping other things and stopping larger things. And so the first evil act was two armadas of warring countries were at war in their patch of water. So she sank them. Yeah. Because I'm going to end this fight because it's loud. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to do it. And there were no repercussions for her because, hey, it's a fucking dragon turtle sinking boats. That's kind of a thing they do sometimes.
Yeah, that's the name of the game with these guys.
Right. And then the second would be she hears about a cult that knows of the Kraken. She hears rumors of it. And she has her own kind of cult that is her information gathering group. And so she creates a tidal wave to wipe out the cult and all the evidence they have of a kraken, and it takes the city with it. And so she's just killed thousands in the process. And again, no real response from the god, but maybe now the Dark Lords are kind of taking notice. Hey, you just wiped out a couple thousand people to kill a few dozen. And this is what I found interesting about dragon turtles is between Fizban's and the Monsters Manual, it kind of blends them. They're almost true dragons, but they're not.
Yeah.
It says specifically they're not true dragons. And so for a dragon to reach immortality, Dracolich or any of the other undead versions, they got to be a true dragon. Well, she's not a true dragon, and she's coming to the end of her lifespan. And she's been doing this for hundreds of years, possibly a millennia. She is now convinced she's the only one that can do it. And
there was no time limit given to keep the Kraken asleep for 200 years. It was do this.
Right. Because if anybody's going to be absent-minded in a task, okay, the god said do it. Right.
It's like the knight at the end of the Last Crusade, right? Who's still sitting there with the Holy Grail, right?
Exactly. And so paranoia has set in, age has set in, and she is desperate. She is also now convinced, I've never been relieved of this. I'm the only one that can do this. This must be extremely important to this god because I've killed thousands in this process. This must be saving more than that because Kraken's the weapons of the gods. Maybe the god needs it for a later fight. Maybe they're preventing it from catastrophe, what have you. So she decides, through the help of her cult, to do a ritual that will basically turn her into a dragon turtle mummy, if you will. Immortal undead dragon turtle. To do this, she gathers up not only her own children, she gathers up their echoes, because the ancient dragon turtle entry in Fizban actually says they are combinations of echoes of dragon turtles. So they've got access to that.
Yep.
Well, how much potential are you fucking up by gathering up a bunch of children dragon turtles, a bunch of children dragons, and sacrificing them to prolong your own life?
And you have to keep in mind too, these are not little ones. These are adult dragon turtles, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, she's island sized at this point. She's miles across as an ancient, and these are big. So she does that act. That is the act that said the Dark Lords say, or the Dark Powers say, nope, that's it. You're done. we're going to snatch you out and we're going to send you to your own domain of dread. And it fit into the naming convention, because when she became a Dark Lord, I changed her name from Tai Feng to and I'm going to brutally mess this up, Xi Tai Feng. Xi is a dragon turtle legend out of China. I think it's actually the oldest dragon turtle legend. Xi was a dragon turtle child of the dragon god, and many of the images we have of them now are funereal stels, so like a small obelisk on top of a dragon turtle. This feeds back into the earlier dragon turtle forced to carry a lich. So Tai Feng snatched out from material plane, sent to the domain of dread. And one thing I hated about reading through Van Rigten's is all of these beings who became Dark Lords seem to get some sort of power boost in the process. You go from being a person to a vampire lord, a person to a wraith, a person to something with a CR. We're going to go the other way. She goes from being an ancient dragon turtle to a mummy lord. And
that's a major step down in power.
It's a major step down in power. And now her fortress that she lives in as a mummy lord, as a rotting being, is on the corpse, on her former corpse. So you got a giant dragon turtle corpse island floating around. And it's got a little...
So dark.
It is so dark because, again, this is supposed to be punitive. And how punitive is it to be reminded at all turns of your former majesty and grandeur and your reduction now? I used to be the master of the waves. Look at my great form. And now the moisture is destroying my rotting mummy body. And like I said, that feeds back into Xi, because the images you see of this dragon turtle are funereal with a stele on them. So her whole fucking corpse is her funereal monument with her little fortress on the back. And so her dark domain that she is in, I have called the Doldrums, which basically means still waters. As a sailor, I can tell you storms are scary, but if you are relying on wind power and you are completely becalmed, no current, no wind, no nothing, you're just there in stagnant water, there is a terror of isolation there.
I legitimately can't imagine. I want you to know, I have essentially two major phobias in my life, and the big one is water. I can't do it. Open ocean terrifies the shit out of me. Still calm water with nothing on the horizon, 360 degrees, and you can't see what's below you, and everything below you can navigate the water better than you.
Yeah.
That's just terrifying.
Yeah. I have spent probably 3 years of my life on a boat in the water. I spent damn near 2 consecutive deployed, and every single patch of water is different, and every single one has their terrors. I was in the Persian Gulf for 23 months, and those waters are deceptively still. I mean, mid-90s PlayStation water graphics. You will go out and look at the ocean, and you're sitting here saying, that's not real. The matrix is glitching and they forgot to render that part. That's not real. And it starts to play with your head. And I know a lot of people think of this, the romance of the open ocean, and you're so far away from everything and you're so free. You're trapped on a tiny goddamn boat, and you are spending every ounce of your waking effort keeping that boat from sinking, because that boat wants to kill you and the ocean wants to kill you.
You're essentially astronauts, right? You're so far away from help, and you rely on the technology at your hands and the people with you to keep you from dying.
And that would be the conversation I would have with Terry right now, and that's what I always get in with the Navy versus the land guys, is because whenever you get military guys together, there's 2 topics of conversation. It's who has it worse because you're bitching, and that time you shit your pants doing something. Sure. If you ever talk to I'll tell you, all the listeners, if you ever talk to a fighter pilot or a pilot, ask them about the time they shit their pants in the cockpit. They've all done it, and they've all got some funny fucking story about it. But I always scared the ground guys, because I'd say, when you go to sleep in your tent, you're not afraid that while you're asleep, some dumbass is going to crash your tent into another tent. And then you're going to wake up in the dark to the sound of water rushing in. And if you're really, really lucky, you're going to get to that hatch before somebody closes it to save the ship. And that is a real terrifying fear. So that was one of my inspirations of making this on the water.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I hope your players can feel that, because when you're talking like, oh, it's going to be a dark fantasy setting, there is a special kind of existential dread that comes with water, that
Right.
comes with the aquatic, the naval, that level of not just combat but adventuring and exploration as well. Like,
Yeah.
you are a speck and the ocean is a titan and you are insignificant compared to it.
And you cannot run away.
Exactly.
I had a friend on an aircraft carrier years ago who described the aircraft carrier had a fire on it, and it lasted for days. It burned from the inside for days, and she would fight the fire for 8 or 9 hours, and then she would have to go to bed. And they would tell her, "Hey, we may wake you up, if the fire gets here." And somehow a fire always causes a flood, and then both of those cause electrical hazards, and then there's toxic gas. It's all a combination. I was in a training simulator when I joined the Navy, where it was essentially a small boat. It was about 3 decks, 3 levels, and they wanted to simulate a hole in the hull that we had to repair. Well, yeah, it wasn't a building. It was 3 decks of a boat in a pool deeper than the boat. And so we were below decks, and I remember we were down there and we were fighting the flood, and it was going poorly, and all the valves open, and all the water was coming in. And I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm about 6'4", 6'5". And so the water was about my collarbone level coming in still when they turned off the lights.
Fuck. No. So that's the point where I poop my pants. I'm done.
A lot of people started screaming. There were a lot, and that's when adults who could swim, join the Navy, are screaming in terror. And it's like, okay, I can't keep it at that level for an entire campaign. No one wants to go through that.
No.
I can do that interspersed once or twice, and I got to change it up. But that's the kind of thing I kind of want to introduce with this. And so, yeah, my domain is this still sea with very few waves, basically no wind. All propulsion is manual. You're rowing. And that's a further slight on Xi Tai Feng. Here is this great being that used to have power over the waves, power over the weather. Nothing. You are just becalmed as your body drifts randomly around. And so that's kind of the idea. This big dragon turtle corpse will drift around. It'll hit the settlements kind of randomly as it goes. And, the cult that serves Xi, because I feel it's important for the Dark Lord to have some sort of lieutenants to kind of interact at the early levels instead of just throwing the Dark Lord at the party. They will be looking to gather treasures to increase X's horde in an attempt to get it powerful enough to resurrect. And Xi has not told them that she has no connection whatsoever. She does not feel it. Her big fatal flaw is she doesn't trust any of them anymore. She feels she is paranoid, but her main quest is to get back her canopic jars. And so if you're not familiar with the canopic jar, if you've seen The Mummy, it was the jars that, they kept the body parts in, as you guys probably spoke about on the one episode. Well, for a fucking dragon turtle, how big are those going to be?
I was about to ask you, how big are those damn jars?
That's what she did with her children and the echoes. She turned them into the canopic jars.
Okay.
So her heart is inside an adult dragon turtle. And so that would kind of be the MacGuffin, is those have been scattered. You got to kind of find them, bring them back together, pseudo complete the ritual to get her in a state to kill her forever.
Yeah. Oh, so she was okay. Is that her irredeemable act then? Is she got most of the way through this ritual? She got 95% of the way through it, and in so doing it, she crossed the line of killing all of these people. And before she could finish, she was close enough. The dark powers came in and scooped her away. You have to finish it to make her mortal or to make her killable. Otherwise, she's just in this in-between purgatory.
Yes.
Okay. That's fucking amazing. I love that. I'm hoping as well that you're going to beef up the Mummy Lord stat blocks and spell lists, because as great as Mummy Lords are, they're not epic level monster. They need to be able to take on all of the CRs above CR8 are wrong. Every one of them is wrong. So
yeah, especially when you introduce magic items and MacGuffins, it's out the fucking door. Yeah.
Yeah. So your Mummy Lord needs to be able to be a 8th or 9th level spellcaster in order to take on a level 11 or 12 party, right? So
to answer that, I like introducing different potential endings for my players to choose from. And depending on the ending they choose, it will get more or less difficult. And it'll create stages of fight. Okay, you fought the Mummy Lord who was trying to stop you, and you've completed the ritual. Well, now it's a fucking adult dragon turtle.
Yep.
That's stage 2, or it's something like that. So one of the things that Dai Fang I've got her doing is I've got this big set piece battle in my mind occurring inside her body cavity. Her body is hollow inside the shell. There's water in there. That's where she keeps one of her canopic jars, her son, that has her heart in it. And so your party's going to have to get the others in there somehow. I mean, that's kind of, I don't want the MacGuffin to be a weapon. I hate that. I want the MacGuffin to be access to the fight or information, something like that. So
that's why like Necronomicons are so popular, is because it's not the sun sword.
Yes. And so I've got in my mind, she is going down there, and in that enclosed space, she's trying to kind of recreate the experience she had before. She's creating stars on the roof of her old shell. She's sort of building almost a construct dragon turtle body to then move around. She's recreating all of this. And that gives me the opportunity then, if the players find a canopic jar, which is a dragon turtle, and somehow revive it, to then fight her construct dragon turtle, and we have a Godzilla Mecha Godzilla fight inside of an ancient dragon turtle while the pilots are on top fighting each other. And I think, that's kind of the set piece that really spawned all of this.
Sorry, I'm looking up dragon turtles right now in Fizzbands, and I'm trying to see. Yes, okay, all right, I got it. They've got regional effects listed here. They've got layer actions. They've got spell casting, and they've got hordes.
Right.
Their hordes are different. They're not like a dragon horde, but they definitely have hordes. Okay, so we're essentially dealing with dragons.
And that's kind of what I was touching on earlier. Is they are in that weird. They are the tangent. They are so close to being a dragon, but for some reason it says they're not. Okay, whatever. I mean, I don't know of any other dragon-like beings that can absorb their echoes, which implies dragon sight and other things, but page 191 of Fizzband says they can do it. So
I want to say that there are, I was going to say gem dragons, but that might be Matt Colville's gemstone dragons I'm thinking of. There's something else that is aware, but I think it might be a Greatwyrm.
Yeah.
Or an ancient gemstone. Like I couldn't quote you directly. I freaking love this.
Yeah.
Is that so? What do you have? So that's your Dark Lord. What do you have for your domain? What does your domain look like? Clearly aquatic, but
it's a sea. There's going to be 3 or 4 island settlements throughout it, and then you're going to have a couple of mobile options. So you're going to have, obviously, the dragon turtle's corpse itself is going to be the court moving around from place to place. And I imagined actually it would be interesting to create a separate location of a fleet of ships that use the wake of that to actually move around. And so you've got the dragon turtle corpse, and then you have the fleet behind it. I don't know, maybe giant chains pulling them, they're riding the wake, what have you. And then a handful of settlements. I've got a character in it that's going to serve the Madame Ava role, the prophet, if you will. And I tried to say to myself, who would be the best counterpoint to a dragon turtle? Well, it's got to be a giant. So it'll be a storm giant. Storm giant, ocean, And hey, look, a storm giant quintessent makes perfect sense. They're immortal. They're living in this land. You could easily say he's been here so long he's lost his mind, or she's lost her mind. And so you've got to bring this prophet. I've named it Soliton, and Soliton is a nautical term for a solitary wave. So there we go.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I'm big into the names. I'm big into linking the names. Yeah.
So am I. I've had to actually steer clear of it because my players will actually look that shit up.
Anamnesis, did they ever?
Sorry?
Did they ever figure out anamnesis?
No, as a matter of fact, anybody that checks the show notes will see that my full name is Adam Nason, and they thought that I was just like jerking off at them with my own, like, self-inserted my own name into it, and I'm like, yeah, sure, you can believe that. And it wasn't until I pointed it out at the very end, and I used it in a sentence, that Dan and Charlie and Dave all slow turned to me and went, "Fuck."
Right. So Soliton will have an island. It'll be the only place with any sort of wind because it's a living storm. And then I'll probably throw in a couple of underwater grottos of some sort. I feel like a hag's grotto would be perfect. I feel like a domain of dread is a hag's paradise. You know, they probably love the ability to endlessly fuck with people there that, you know, can't get away. So
okay, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
How many levels are we talking about? How long is this campaign? Level 1 to 20, level 3 to 12? Are you starting off in tier 2 and going all the way to the end? How do you feel those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I didn't have a good I would say,
sorry, my reasoning for this is sea hags are super low powered, and they're obviously the right answer.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, there would be some homebrewing involved to kind of go in the Hellboy Bogrush direction.
Yeah,
and
very cool.
It would be I mean, we've talked about it. You can make a hag hit outside their level by, or you've talked about it, we haven't, but you can make a hag hit outside their level just by the creatures that work for it and the influences. But I would say I'd want to do a 1 to 12 with the option to go to 15, maybe 16. I feel like a 15 party with the right magic items and the right skill sets could probably take a CR 17 or 18. Yeah.
I'm going to float an idea before we go any further here.
Yeah.
Or rather, here's my question. How does this end? They kill her?
Yeah. So they could destroy the mummy lord body, and okay, they're free. That's the low level. But then, finish the ritual and kill her, and you set free all the echoes, and that undoes it, and then that's the end. Yeah.
Well, I always love that twisting of the knife. My players in the last session, they were level 20. They hunted down all the pieces of everything that they needed to do. They were right on the cusp of all becoming undead themselves and powering way the fuck up. And they were in the capital city of the region, and they're like, hey, you know what? We've succeeded. This is great. And then they discovered that some asshole had chained a bunch of enlarge reduce spells on the Tarask and had made it microscopic.
Yeah.
And any minute now, that motherfucker is going to be its regular size, and we're in a floating city. And it's somewhere in the city, and there's no way to find it. So they were doing a massive evacuation that had nothing to do with the rest of the plot. It was just one of the lieutenants got their final comeuppance by saying, here you go. And I'm thinking, what do you do when you finally kill her? The Kraken wakes up.
Excuse me, I'm writing things down now.
Right? Because you built it right in at the very beginning. She's there to keep the Kraken quiet, right? To keep it asleep.
Right.
A ancient dragon turtle in the death throes, the entire realm that's built around this dragon turtle coming crashing to, like, I assume the sea will swell and there will be giant upheaval all over. The Kraken's got to wake up, right?
Right.
And that makes me feel like the level 15 party with magic items and a couple of epic boons and a armada of allies and a giant quintessent versus the Kraken, right? That finally comes to, and maybe the Kraken wakes up and busts out, because the Kraken is by the gods, and the gods are more powerful, I think, than the dark powers. So maybe the Kraken can bust out and find a way home.
Right.
And then the party's got to chase them back to the material plane and kill it there.
Right.
Something like, there's my big epic final set piece.
Yeah. No, I like that. And then I can chain that into the beginning of Storm King's Thunder. We've released that Kraken.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, sorry. So that was the big thing, is that, like, that Kraken has just been sitting there as just kind of in the background, mentioned every once in a while, and any player that has played more than 2 campaigns should be sitting there going, that is Chekhov's gun. I know that's coming up later, right?
Yeah. And off the heels of a fight with a mummy lord and an adult dragon turtle and possibly an ancient dragon turtle, that's gonna be a shitty fight.
But I think that's actually by CR the power scaling of it all too, right? Like I think Mummy Lord is lesser than an adult dragon turtle.
Yeah, Mummy Lord's like 15, Ancient Dragon Turtle's like 24. So it's right there with the Kraken.
Yeah, the Kraken's 23. That one I just happen to know off the top of my head.
Okay. But yeah, so
anyway, so I've got some. Sorry, do you have more to run through with the different? You've got a couple of different islands here that are laid out. One that's based on folk horror, one on body horror.
I think the settlements, and I think it's good in Domains of Dread, you can't have a consistent one horror theme throughout the whole thing because it becomes a little stale, and it's difficult to maintain that in a way that keeps the players and the characters engaged. So I'm using my settlements as ways to introduce other elements of horror. So I figure going back and looking at the famous movies about islands, okay, Island of Dr. Moreau. Yep. Perfect. These people are going to think there's no way back. We're here forever. We need to adapt to our watery world. Let's start experimenting. And then in comes the body horror.
Are you going to use the Simic hybrids from Ravnica for this? Because it's built right in.
Yeah, I probably would. Yeah. And then
oh shit, what's it called? They've got some sort of, hold on, let me look this up really quickly. They've got a kind of creature there, which is just, it's not even really a stat block, is more of just a template. Give me 1 second while I pull it up.
Yeah, take your time.
Here we go. The Krasis. In the deep sinkholes that serve as laboratories and guild halls of the Sim Combine, biomancers employ a combination of magic and scientific method to create novel life forms. They coax new morphologies from existing creatures or combine traits from multiple organisms. Some Krasis are unique creatures that can't reproduce. A few multiply and become part of the guild standard menagerie. But here's the thing. You give them major adaptations and minor adaptations, and then you give them category 1, 2, or 3. They're all kind of aquatic, and they're all different like sizes, and they've got different things like they have bioluminescent markings, they can fly, they've got hypnotic display or venomous sting, they can regenerate, they have ink clouds or climbing speeds, and you're just supposed to mash this shit together.
Right.
For different kinds of just aquatic themed monsters. And these are in Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica in the bestiary at the end of that book. Yeah, so if you didn't know that was there, you do now. I've been kind of low-key holding on to these for my own campaign to have weird body horror, Island of Dr. Moreau kind of smashing ideas together.
Yeah, and so the trade with that island would be in organs or in some. You introduced a non-human player character. Yeah, we want that piece of you to see how well that works. So could do that. We've got a settlement that I was thinking of folk horror, and I was trying to think like how do you go into folk horror? And these would be a group of people that think that the end of the world has happened, and actually Xi Tai Feng saved them. They sort of worship, hey, you saved us from the apocalypse, thank you. And so to celebrate every time Tai Feng's court arrives, in between they build sand castles, which mimics the flooding of the city when she wiped it out. And I was thinking maybe almost Wicker Man style. Maybe whoever built the best sandcastle, congratulations, 12-year-old kid, you're in it while we flood it, and the water washes away our sins, and we're born again. And
I almost want to make these Kuatoa.
I've got the Kuatoa listed somewhere in here because I think it would be an interesting element if one of the canopic jars, one of the dragon turtle corpses, was being worshipped by the Kuatoa. They found this fucking thing, they're worshiping it, it's got some level of animation, and that's causing an issue, and then you got to deal with them.
When you have an inanimate object that has kind of a will of its own, like if they're worshiping this thing as a god and then it's becoming a god slowly, I would turn to Rime of the Frost Maiden, because you have Auriel's like crystal that's actually a thing that you can fight. I would turn to that for inspiration, just for this non-biological combat moment, right? Where there's this dragon turtle shell that is floating and crackling with lightning or whatever the Kuatoa decided that it is, right? And it's just floating around this massive grotto or cavern or lagoon or whatever you decide, and it's just shooting out acid or like whatever bullshit that they come up with.
Right.
And then when you finally do enough damage to it, it'll crash to the ground. Or maybe you just have to kill enough Kuatoa so that the belief is not strong enough anymore and it crashes to the ground, and then you can get into it.
Yes. And of course, you introduce Kuatoa, and you can almost go like the movie Dagon, you know, and that almost goes back to that body horror. Hey, we're kind of trying to figure out how to do this. But so the last thing I'll say on the Domain of Dread is for the reflections of the acts, spreading out through the whole place. I've put that largely in the random encounter table. And so in my random encounter table, I've got the 3 acts almost recreated. You've got as the ships are going, the mists are coming in, and the mists start forming buildings. And then amongst the buildings, you see people running around, and they're enjoying themselves. And then they all start running, and there's a massive tidal wave of mist that rolls over the ship and the fleet, and it's completely silent until that hits. And as it passes over you, there's the rush of water and the scream and the crash of buildings and all these people dying. And make your Constitution save, or you take an exhaustion level as this thing goes. And so I've got that. I've got coming across the shipwrecks, and I think this would be torment again to Tai Feng. Is you come across shipwrecks that all appear to have been victims of dragon turtles, and they are missing their treasure hold. It's all already been taken. So she's just seeing the results of the others' works and that she can't do anymore. And lastly, and I don't think any of my players would pick up on this, it would be the sound of a heartbeat. And so they would just be sailing along, and then suddenly there is this just drowning everything out as the sound of a heartbeat. And it is going and speeding up and louder, and then just stops. And if they pay attention, which they won't, they'll realize that 3 or 4 times they come across this, each of the heartbeats is different. And each of this, she knows, each of them is the last heartbeats of her children during the ritual. And so that just really drives home what happened. Will the characters pick up on it? No, but that's the point. This is her realm and her punishment. So that's what I've got.
Okay, I've got a lot of ideas here. I've been taking notes as you've been talking.
Yeah.
Let me spitball at you for a minute.
Happy. Yeah.
Let's start with her moving corpse. She has a structure on it that she lives in, her actual, or does she just like sit there in the open weather on the back of her corpse?
I wanted it to be almost a ziggurat. I wanted it to be pyramid-y. I wanted to go for a Mesoamerican feel because I don't feel they get enough representation in anything. And then the Asian flavor was just too perfect for this. So so some sort of ziggurat that her cult works out of and that she lives in. So
is she herself mobile, or does she sit kind of half mobile in a sarcophagus, never able to live, never able to die, just giving orders and asking for reports?
So she is mobile. Okay. And she does spend a lot of time doing that. She spends a lot of time going down to her, we'll call it her grotto inside, where she's trying to recreate her environment. And then I imagined that anytime she pulled into port and the dragon turtle landed, there would almost be like her holding court. People have to come up, they have to present some sort of tribute. Sailors have to earn their right in the fleet. And that would be my chance to introduce her to the players directly, because her interest in adventurers would be, hey, did the Kraken wake up? Is it awake? Tell me what's happened. I need to know, because I'm gathering my strength and I'm going back there and I'm keeping my job.
Do you think the players will know right away that she's the big bad?
I want to make it a little vague. I want her to be a little sympathetic in her paranoia. And I think it would be good to have almost the Starscream Grima Wormtongue lieutenant that appears to be the big bad, and in reality is part of the dark powers torment of her.
I think that you've got a unique opportunity here to make her be the big good guy. But every once in a while you'll hear about, so follow me on this. I have 4 different breakdowns here. The first one is her moving corpse. For me, I take it or leave it, I would shroud it in fog that's darker, so that you don't realize you're walking on the back of a dragon turtle. As a matter of fact, most people talk about the temple on the island that moves through the fog or whatever. What do the locals call the moving corpse? The island. They need some evocative name as she moves around, and she doesn't follow a pattern, does she? It's just kind of like where the waters take her.
Yeah, and that was to really hammer home you used to have power over the seas, and now you are at their mercy. So yeah.
But it also has to be a reflection of her. So I wonder if she goes where she becomes obsessed. So if the players were at a temple of hers and they destroyed it, she will go there the moment she finds out. She doesn't want to go there, but she always has to go where her mind will force her to go. That's her level of paranoia. She can't escape her own thoughts. So the players might be able to convince her of things if they ever figure that out, or that Grima Wormtongue could be whispering, and that's the person that's actually navigating this whole thing, right? Saying, where are we going to go next and for what purposes and whatnot, is based on, we haven't been here recently. Did you know there's a festival going on next weekend? And just, it starts floating in that direction.
It would be rumors of the Kraken.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It could be, there's been a lot of squid life seen around the docks here, right? And that would be just enough to make her concerned enough to go in that direction, right? So I would honestly look at the regional effects of the ancient dragon turtle that are in Fizzbands, and I would just apply that to the moving
yeah.
That should be flavorful enough to really hammer that home to the players. They'll be able to notice things happening before she shows up.
Yeah.
Are you spending a lot of time on weather?
So that's the difficulty, is if you're talking about there's no wind and there are no seas, that makes weather a little more difficult.
But that could be the dichotomy, is the storm is rolling through, there's thunder in the air, the wind is whipping at the trees, but the settlements are still and the water doesn't move. The sails won't go, right? Like you can feel the wind whipping at your jacket, but the sails are dead in the water.
So which is the ghost? Is it the sails of the ghost, or is it the storm that's the ghost? There's some, I love that. Yeah.
My next thought was the different locations that you have. I think that you have built in some really cool locations in the backstory that should be focal points of this Domain of Dread. The first one is obviously the place of the sacrifice itself. Right. And I think that might be the place where she will never go, the forbidden island or whatnot that not even she will go to.
Which would be where Soliton is hiding.
Yeah, very likely could be hiding like right under her nose, the one place she'll never look. Right. But when you get there, the waters are red as if with blood. Right. And like, this is where your undead body horror comes back. All like, her children were the big sacrifices, sure, but she also sacrificed whole swaths of her cult. Right. You've got to think that they're going to be not just undead there, but things like the Sorrowsworn as well that have been destroyed. There's a bunch of wretched running around. I was thinking about the city that she flooded and killed everybody. Well, all of those structures still exist, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the waters slowly rose. Everyone in that drowned. The Kraken's priests, most of them drowned. Only a handful. I would say a handful got away, because those are going to be evocative NPCs to use later, right? They are the bad guys who are going to come to your players and say, "Did you know she's actually evil? This is what she did to us." And everyone else is her spies or her cultists, or going, "No, she's great. I don't know. These guys are crazy," right?
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah. And that can set them as to who do we trust? Who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy?
And that's the reflection of her paranoia.
Right.
So the players are starting to wonder, who do we trust? And you get a lot of gray area here, a lot of really interesting, the crazies that tell the truth, right? And that's a lot of fun.
And I'm not sure how to thread the needle, but it would be interesting to then introduce the concept of maybe somebody in her cult on her corpse is actually a member of the Kraken cult as a deep spy, or reverse. But that might be a little too nuanced.
No, the only thing is the Kraken priests, whoever the survivors are, these crazies, they've got something on this person. Like maybe that there's a cultist, and this is one of your, you think, side quests, but it's actually a major plot point.
Right.
Where the person approaches the party after the third or fourth time, maybe that they've stepped foot on the corpse and they've interacted with the people, and this one cultist or I guess cultist follower comes to them and says, look, they've got my kid and they are making it so that I have to feed them information about things, and it's really, really horrible, but like, can you please get my kid back from, and sure enough, they are holding a kid hostage.
Right.
However, they're doing it in the name of good, right? Like, because nobody's good here, right? They're all bad guys.
Yeah. And if you were having trouble getting the party to pick up, hey, this subplot idea is actually major plot, you need to go on it, give them one of the canopic jars that you need to complete the ritual.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to do this, you have to help us. You have no choice.
So I was thinking about that. I'm going to jump ahead. The canopic jars were one of the 4 things that I had written down. I was thinking, what goes in them? I came up with 5 things: eyes, tongue, heart, stomach, and brain.
Yes. Yeah, that's the traditional. I think the traditional is, eyes, tongue, heart, and brain. Normally it's the 4, but heart obviously is going to be one. That's going to be the hardest to get to. And I haven't really decided if, when she has the, her heart canopic jar in her body cavity, is the heart actually even there, or is it an empty jar that she's keeping an eye on? And I almost imagine if you put the heart there, that's the reason she never leaves the island. She is paranoid. If I leave the island might keep going without me, and now I lose this.
What if, okay, so here's your tragedy. What if she's looking for her heart and she can never find it, and that's the thing she wants, it's always out of reach, where she's looking for her heart, and the damn thing is, every time that you get one of the other canopic jars that's been spread out, you bring with it one of her 4 dead children. And when they all come together, then she realizes her heart has been in her chest the whole time, and it begins to beat again because her lost loves are finally returned to her.
And that could be the she's looking for her heart, but in reality what she's looking to do is, when this is difficult when you're going back to the Dark Lord concept, because they're supposed to be unrepentant and never seek atonement. So is she seeking her heart, or is she seeking to release the souls of her children and the echoes that she has trapped with her? But
I think the heart is a metaphor for her children's love, and she wants that. And it isn't until she brings them all together, or that, like, your players will figure out, we have to bring all the pieces together. Each one represents a different one of the kids, right? And we bring them all together so that her heart will beat with love. But instead, the kids are like, look what you fucking did to us. And then that heart beats with rage instead.
So to answer your question on what the canopic jars hold, I am going to cheat.
Sure.
She's really fucking big. The heart has 4 chambers. Each canopic jar holds a piece of the heart.
Cool.
Yeah. You got to bring them all back together.
Do you put another object in there with it? Because I was thinking, you've got a lot of thematic shit. The tongue can be with the Kuatoa, who are chanting a god into existence. The eyes can be with the spies from the Kraken priests, who are trying to figure out the different aspects of what's going on there. The brain can be the quintessent, who is going to represent the paranoia of thinking too hard about things. I was thinking, so in my head, I kind of went down a rabbit hole for a minute. I like the idea of there being a bunch of different islands because it's an aquatic theme, but there should also be a peninsula so that the players can try to walk out and find that, no, it's just mists. You can't walk out. You'll turn around and come back. There's no reason why it can't be a peninsula. And in that peninsula would be a bunch of the Sorrow-sworn hungry, and they're guarding the stomach. That just, like, thematically made sense to me, because what other hungry thing? But you could do like tribal gnolls, because they're always hungry, right?
Right. What was was it a 90s or an 80s Ray Liotta movie, No Escape? They thought they were on an island, but they were on a peninsula, or vice versa.
Yeah, it was something like that. I vaguely remember that. But yeah, I like the idea of them saying, well, we can't leave by ship. Because, okay, so here's one of my other notes. In the mists, normally the mists drive you crazy and get you lost and then eventually kill you, right?
Yeah.
I think in the mists for your Domain of Dread, it should just be the echoes of her tidal waves that push you back into the domain.
Echoes of the tidal waves. So yes, on the peninsula, I think that's fantastic because it introduces the best piece of a effective horror, which is hope, and then taking it away, or it's impossible. And then, Echoes of the Tidal Wave keeps pushing you back, maybe even to her corpse as it's moving around. You cannot get away from her. But I think that there still needs to be the detrimental aspect of levels of exhaustion, because it's as if you've been swimming for hours. You're just worn out from doing this.
Or it just destroys your ship every fucking time, right? So you guys, you head up into the mists on the giant galleon that you managed to save up to buy, back into the mists. Off you go. You wake up the next morning on a beach surrounded by broken bits of ship. Right. And you are waterlogged with 3 levels of exhaustion.
And Xi Tai Feng's priest is looking down on you and saying, "Thank you for this tribute, but you could have presented it in a more appropriate manner at a more appropriate time."
That was one of the things, is I think you should have a specific place where the players always wash ashore again over and over, and that'll drive home the loop, right? Because you've got this sandbox of a number of different small islands. They'll be moving back and forth mostly on ships, and that's a problem, because ships are not, you're taking your shelter with you, right? And as much as ships are frightening and the water is frightening, it's not the same way as you're walking down the path and you hear something squawking from the bushes to your left, or a roar in the distance. It's different. It's different when you're on a ship or a moving castle or whatever it is. So you always take it away, and you always spit them back into the same place in the very center of the map.
So a way I think you could do that pretty cleanly is I would always spit them back into the fleet of ships following Xi Tai Feng as a shipwreck. Hey, you wake up and you are clinging to the capsized hull, and I'm going to roll a d20 to see which ship picks you up. And one of the things I wanted to do is create a random table of the ships to see who picks them up. I could see that going well. I could see that going poorly, because the question becomes, well, where do we get our next ship? Where do we get our third ship? And if we're not traveling with the fleet, we're rowing. How do we navigate? And that's a level of difficulty I have not put a thought into yet. So
I think that she wiped out an entire city. Right, by drowning everyone there, but the structures still stand. What if, one of the noteworthy things that you should just have a ghost town where all of the ships are still there and all of the buildings are still there, and there's just nothing. It's a port city, and there's nothing there, but everyone talks about the ghosts. And here you go. All of the ships that are there are real ships. These are actual echoes of the ships from the armadas that were sunk. So all of the people are dead, but the civilization is gone, and their structures are all left behind, as if they had just gone off to battle. So all of the holds are always full of food that does not rot, because it's always about to, it just got loaded up. There's just no people here anymore.
So same concept, but I'm going to Waterworld it, because Waterworld, if you're in that, Waterworld is a worse horror movie to be in than most of the fucking ones we've talked about.
And not just because of the acting, no.
Not because of the acting. Jack Black was great in it. He had one line. He was phenomenal. He was the pilot. I loved him. I think Kim Coates, I always get his name wrong. But anyways, a lot of good first-timers there. Dennis Hopper, never mind. But if the city is waterlogged, what if there was a floating, lashed together shipwreck, atoll type island above it, but the ghosts from the city below had come up and driven away all the survivors? And so that's where you show up. You show up on this floating atoll. You don't understand why there's nobody here. There's some level of provisions available. There's a seemingly endless number of ships you can cut from the lashes and go.
But the damn thing is, you take that ship and it gets destroyed. When you wash up, that ship is there again.
The ship is there again. Yeah. And maybe it's got scars from where you got hit, or some sort of remnants. Okay.
So I also think that I don't know how much you want to bury the idea of the Kraken being a legitimate threat at the very end of the campaign, or how much you want to work in the Kraken priests. We actually have a stat block for Kraken priests in the monster Monsters of the Multiverse. It was in Volos. There's so much good stuff that you're going to be able to pull out from not just Ghosts of Saltmarsh, but also there's a lot of fishery stuff in Icewind Dale as well, up in 10 towns. So they've got a lot of like fishery trinkets. I think they got a trinket table, and a lot of it is based on kind of the fisher folk that live up there. And so
much Scrimshaw, just so much Scrimshaw. But
so this is kind of what I'm thinking. You've got the place of sacrifice where your quintessence is hiding. This fallen city where the Kraken people used to live, which has been abandoned, and now there are new people living there. But they all follow her. They're allowed to live there because they follow her. But there's still graffiti keeps popping up of tentacles, or there's squids nailed to doors as a threat, shit like that.
And that could be our tie-in to the cultist on her corpse, her cultist. It might not even be a "you have my child" thing. It's I am working with them because I want to go to this settlement to get riches, gold, whatever, because of reason. They're doing it out of greed. And so they're working with the Kraken cult to create those rumors, the tentacle marks, the whatever. And then they report on, oh, did you hear at so-and-so's island? They spotted a Kraken and his name was Bill, the one you're trying to kill. And oh, they did? And they get there. And now I'll accept my tribute.
I like that. I also really like toying with the idea of the fact that the Kraken is not here at all.
No.
This is all just straight rumors that her star scream is putting in the background to keep her paranoid.
Yes, and to somehow enrich himself because I'm gathering these riches, I'm gathering this tribute to go into your hold, which in my mind, her hoard is some cavity of her body that is rotted, and they're just leaving a trail of these items out behind her. Doesn't matter how many times they fill it, just slips out of their grasp. Because how fucking annoying would that be to be a dragon turtle and just like, oh, there goes my shit.
Well, I was thinking about this. If we're following the same rules as the dragons from Fizzbands, she's going to have multiple hordes littered around. Right. You could have a different canopic jar in each one of them.
Yeah.
And then every time that you rescue one, your players will be able to go to that horde and find most of it's been picked over, but there's still some items. And this helps them kind of gear up and level up because there's really nowhere for them to get magic items either, right?
There's really not. I introduced a random encounter again with the shipwrecks, and you could, hey, you come across a shipwreck and there's something on it, but that doesn't feel as necessarily rewarding.
No, you stumble upon it at that point.
Yeah, and I was listening to your episode earlier today, in fact, about gifts and boons and things you give, and I like to give tailored magic items depending on the tier. That first tier is going to be the magic items that lets them do that epic moment that they designed the character to do. You wanted that smooth talking bard that can get away with anything? Cool. Here is your chainmail veil, the veil of suggestion, and you get advantage on all persuasion and deception checks outside of combat. Cool, go ahead. I'm going to take that away from you because it's fucking broken. But yeah, I think tying it to a horde or even to the gifts of the Kraken priest, oh, we got this for you, it seems to be useful, would be a great idea. I don't know why I keep putting my notepad and my pen down. I should just keep them because I keep writing down half of what you say. So
I'm looking at your random encounter table here, and you've got this amazing column beside it all, which is combat. It's the type: combat, narrative, exploration, atmosphere. And these are all, like, each one of these is great. I have two notes. One is, instead of 1d20 table with all of this shit, I would break these down into 4d6 tables so that you've got more control over. Maybe one of them's d8 or d10 if they're going to run across it more often, but you can choose which one they're rolling on, because you may want them to have a combat, but you're never going to roll it randomly. And at that point, you're just pulling encounters out of your ass instead of saying, hey, here's the random encounters. I would rather have more smaller tables so that it always feels a little bit different. And you get to say to them, roll a d6. I go, why? Or roll a d8. But you also get to combine them. If you've got one that's weather and another one that's combat, then you can make them roll on both. One that's narrative and another one that's exploration, you can combine them somehow, right?
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So to stroke my own ego, if you've looked through the random encounter tables, which of the random encounters is your favorite?
I don't know what soul jellies are, but I fucking love the name of it. Scurvy is damned hilarious, but I am mostly, and I mean, special place in my heart for a sail mimic.
Yeah.
I've got a special place in my heart for sea serpents, which I've never seen used appropriately, and I would love to see that. I don't know what ship in a bottle means, but I'm fucking intrigued.
Well, if you scroll down, but no,
oh, there we go. You got descriptions on them all.
Yeah.
Ship in a bottle. God, yeah. I'm also just blown away by how detailed your notes are. For the listeners, I mean, it's going to pick ship in a bottle. Amongst wreckage or floating on its own, you discover a glass bottle floating on the surface of the water. If floating on its own and not visible through the mist, this is discovered when it clinks against the hull of the ship. The bottle is the size and shape of a large wine or rum bottle. The cork is held down tightly by a wire lid. The faded label says Sailor's Escape and shows a weary-looking sailor smiling wanly and holding up a mug. Inside, the bottle is half full of what appears to be seawater, and floating on the water is a tiny ship. No matter which way you turn the bottle, the ship is always floating upright, although it does get tossed about on the tiny waves. A perception check / investigation check will reveal that the tiny ship has an actual tiny crew on it, moving about and trying to sail the ship. If left alone, the ship will go about normal sailing activities, both day and night, seemingly oblivious to the fact that they are trapped. I'm halfway done. The amount of detail that you have put into this is phenomenal. This, to me, feels like a set piece more than a random encounter, because I don't want them to run into this 4 times. I want them to run into this and obsess over it for like an entire session.
Yeah.
And all of your entries are like this. They're all so big. There's more detail on any one of your random encounters than there are on some of the fucking domains of dread in their entirety.
Yeah. No, it's a disservice to DMs. If I were to write this for somebody else, it's a disservice to them. I write it as though this is exactly what I'm reading to the players.
No, I know, and it's beautiful the way that this is put together here. Like, I don't know. Like, I love everything on here. The one thing that I want to recommend to you, so the pegs, I believe I read somewhere else, is the name of a ship.
That's the name of the crew. That's what they know them as, the pegs. Yeah.
I would really rename that. It's 2023. Your players will be making pegging jokes the entire time, and you will lose your sense of atmosphere.
Yeah. No, yeah. And honestly, it's difficult. We kind of touched on it earlier with horror. I feel there's a need to introduce the levity every once in a while just to break it up. But you are right to do that. I mean, so for those who aren't reading this, because there's only 2 people that have, the Pegs is a crew of, it's a haunted ship, and they are pirates. And the ship is known because the masthead is just a bunch of severed heads in a big wire net on the front of it. And the Pegs are pirates that don't want plunder. They want your crew. They drag your crew back aboard their ship, they cut their head off, and they replace it with a peg head piece of the ship from their ghost ship. So that's why I went with the pegs. And I'm explaining that so that people didn't think it was some other sort of joke. But yeah, the peg heads or the headless would be good as well. Yeah.
Even if you could find another word for peg, like you could undermine it in low key, like, oh, they're called the splinters, and then you find out fucking why. Yeah. Right? Like it could just be a different word for it. There are just some words out there, and I mean, it comes up about every 20 episodes on the podcast where something is tainted. We just can't say the word taint without every host giggling.
Right. So, yeah. And the pegs were, as all good D&D things, it was a side thought of a side thought of a side thought. I had another crew earlier in this called the Silent Singers, because everybody on the crew was going to be unable to speak for some fucking reason. The captain speaks through a parrot, because when one of the waves, the tidal waves, rolled over that was going to try and pull their souls out, pulled his soul into the parrot next to him, took the parrot soul with him. So it's a zombie corpse with a parrot on it, and there's and one of the members of that, oh, he doesn't talk. Why? Well, we call him Necklaces. And then you see Necklaces Carl, and he's got a peg head. Doesn't have a head, just got a fucking wooden peg sticking up from it. And he's wearing necklaces. Oh, we call him Necklaces Carl. Because he wears necklaces. And we completely ignore the fact that he's got a fucking wooden stump for a head.
I think that this is where your comedy should come from, is not from the scenarios. This is a problem that a lot of DMs have, is they add the levity in the naming conventions, but that means that you're stuck with that for the rest of your campaign every time someone brings it up.
Yeah.
Or they have that hilarious scenario. We all have to go fight the fucking space clowns from goddamn Spelljammer or something, right? Like, that
would be a good domain of dread, by the way.
Absolutely it would.
Love killer clowns from outer space. So
as someone who was a clown in a haunted event for years, I'm all about it. But like,
we're brothers separated by countries, because I've been a clown for probably 7 Halloweens. And like twisted metal sweet tooth makeup, and it's phenomenal.
Okay, when we're done this recording, let's, without context in the art part of the Discord, let's drop in our clown costumes.
If I can find a photo of mine, I will. Absolutely.
Sure. When I see yours, I'll drop in mine. I've got 2 or 3 that are freaking amazing. So
I'll see if I can. If not, this Halloween, I'll put it on and just drop it in without comment.
Beauty. So, yeah. Beauty. I love it.
Perfect.
But anyway, no, when it comes to the levity and the comedy, it should be your crew, your beloved NPCs, not the ones that will die in the shipwreck, but the ones that'll get washed ashore with you.
Yeah.
So what I did with my pirate campaign was I gave them, there were no comedy creatures there, but there was the Kenku named Squawks, and all he could do was squawk, and he sat up in the crow's nest. There was I had a fat human chef. His name was Artel Crom, and Artel Crom was the most lecherous, disgusting, his fat belly hanging out the bottom of the white stained wife beater shirt. The apron is just covered in like different colored handprints because he never washes his hands. He just wipes them. And he just wants to play cards and get drunk and look at the women, right?
And drawstrings on his pants aren't pulled tight because he can't reach them and he doesn't want to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, but he's really good with a butcher knife in a fight, and he's got your back, and he'll feed you and heal you up. But he is just gross. And like, that's where the levity comes from, is these over the top side characters that will be on your crew. I got a lot of mileage out of the fact that their ship was called the Deadly Daughters, because there was Captain Wharton, who had the only working blunderbuss in the entire realm, and was the only one that could actually fire it and knew how to maintain it and reload it. But he had 2 really hot daughters that were like super like goth flavored to them, and they were just like sarcastic, kind of Elvira.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and the players, even the girls at the table were like, okay, so what's going on with the daughters? But if you spoke to them, the captain shows up and puts the blunderbuss in your chest and says, keep walking. And so the Deadly Daughters is not that the daughters themselves are deadly, it's that it is deadly to talk or interact with them. And this became a little thing for a handful of sessions. Like, it's that level of interaction and comedy for your downtime, so that your encounters can be more serious and more deadly.
Yes. Yeah. And to expound on that a little bit, it's, you have to introduce those moments to save yourself from your players finding the levity in your big bad.
Oh, absolutely.
You got to give them an outlet, because they're going to need an outlet. And so they laugh and they joke and, oh, this is funny, and oh, the parrot did this, and blah, 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 blah. And now that that's out of their system, let me get in your fucking head and let me screw with you. So,
and let me kill one of your beloved NPCs that were the comedy moment to really drive the point home later, right? If we have 2 or 3 fun jesters, I'm not going to kill the beloved goblin jester, but I'm going to kill the bard that's in the party. I love to give NPCs out because I love to take NPCs away, and I love to have them be little windows. See, and that's some of my random encounters too, is you're at sea. Everybody has trinkets in their own cabin. They've got the things that remind them of home, or this is their home, right? So they've got trinkets. Your random encounter table is the NPCs you're traveling with. Sometimes you piss them off. Sometimes you get on their good side. If you roll a 20, they'll give you a small gift.
Yeah.
Right. And it's shit like that. And so that pays off with my players anyway. So let me see. Let me go over my notes here.
Well, so I wanted to jump in on that same exact thing. I give my sidekicks and my DMPCs with the warning that this is your safety net. It works once, and if you need your safety net, I'm gonna fucking break your heart. Mm-hmm. That's the agreement here. We'll get you a dog, but you have to realize the dog's gonna die someday, and it's gonna hurt no matter how long you have it. So like, back to my grung, my favorite character I've got, Jub. So Jub, which you're laughing at his name, I think, but
I love grung as well. They just had my players just had a grung named Cleek. Oh, and there was 5 E's in the middle of his name, and they got him eaten. So.
I've one of your Halloween episodes where you have the grung defending the bank that cast Disintegrate. Fucking hilarious. I laugh. I listen every time I hear that. So my grung finally found a pair of gloves so he could touch them without hurting them. And they got kind of weirded out because he always wanted to hold somebody's hand. He always who's holding Jub's hand? He's walked up to somebody, he's trying to hold your hand. And eventually one of my players cast tongues. They did not warn me they were going to do this. They just said, hey, I cast tongues and I want to talk to fucking Jub. And I said, okay, you didn't warn me. Cool. Jub is now the grung equivalent of a 6-year-old. He does not understand where he is. He does not understand what is going on. He is your inadvertent child soldier. And that's why he's trying to hold your hand. Because he is in fucking Barovia and you've dragged this fucking grung 6-year-old through the Amber Temple. And he's terrified. And so now there's a subplot of how do we save him / he's keeping the entire party alive because he's the healer. And so, yeah, when I take him away and when he dies, his corpse is going to hit the floor and then a little ghostly monochrome silhouetted spirit of a grung is going to stand up out of his corpse and he's going to walk over to the closest player and he's going to try and hold their hand. And they're going to look in his face and realize there's confusion and there's fear and he realizes he's alone. And then the wind is going to go by and it's just going to disappear.
But does he ever speak?
The only thing he says is Jub. That's why they call him that. And I think I'm going to say that's grung for help me or something like that. Like, yeah. It's supposed to be heartbreaking. Now his backstory is fucking bonkers. It's a whole Power Rangers fucking thing and it's insane. So,
but this is where this is why I'm all for characters that are comedy, but not situations that are comedy, right? Because you can take the character and you can use them a million different ways. A scenario or a circumstance or situation, it's that one note. You hit that joke once and you move on, right? And then people see it as being either silly, and if it doesn't land, you're fucked. But if it doesn't land on the character, you can just retire the character or double down or try again with a different scenario with them or like whatever. So let's talk really quickly about your commoners, because you've got a lot of cultists and spies and monsters. Who are your people?
I'm weak on this. So the people are going to be the islands of the sea that got snatched up with the Xi Tai Feng, and maybe some survivors from the tidal wave. Though I've got in my mind there's enough of a time difference between the tidal wave and the final act happening that doesn't quite play well. So yeah, other than the little bit I have I got an island of Dr. Moreau, I got an island of folklore-ish cultists, Wicker Man style. I really don't have much on commoners. Being sea-based, I mean, the fleet, I had the idea you're going to have, your fisher people, your salvagers, and the ships that defend all the other ships from the monsters of the sea. Sea serpents coming in. I'd like to include Sahuagin. I don't know how to do that because I'm not super familiar with them, even though I've listened to the episodes. I've never played with them, but aquatic domain scary shit seems applicable.
So Sahuagin, Marrow, Merfolk, Sea Elves, Tritons, you've got a lot of underwater mobs to play with, but if you're going to do that, then you've got to go underwater.
Right.
And if you're going to do that, like I would almost, You know, in Peter Pan, the mermaids are in this lagoon, hard
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
That's how I would play with any one of these. And same thing with your hags as well, right? Like, where are you going to put them on the map? What's really interesting here is you've got this big sandbox, right? And the players are going to run around and try to figure out what's happening with this island that shows up, the island with the temple that shows up shrouded in fog, and like trying to figure out what they're doing, what's their big immediate plot hook, who are they identifying with, at what point do they go to different places, like who are they sympathetic to, and who are they avoiding. You've got hags, that's great if they're sea hags, great for tier 1 or tier 2 encounter. And of course everything is more difficult the moment you include water, everything is deadlier, right? So but what if they don't get there until they're level 11, right? And so the idea of the canopic jars, I think, is your trail of breadcrumbs for them to follow, the slowly revealing where the next one is how you string them along from one location to another. But if I was going to have any of these underwater creatures, I would keep them in a lagoon or keep them way out in the deepest part of this region. You have to seek them out on purpose. They don't want to deal with you, and there's really no reason for your Dark Lord or for any of the priests or anybody else or the quintessence to go to them. Just leave that as a part of the map over there. You can go talk to them if you'd like, and I might give them the ability to join a water festival or something there, like something that's very different. It only happens once, and then when they go back, there's no sign of these creatures ever again. Just that weird temporary nature of the ocean.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Am I
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, like temporary nature of the ocean, tide shift, things change, things move on. We think of migratory when we think of birds, but sharks, whales, a lot of things are incredibly migratory on a scale that birds can't even compete with. So
and so I would do that. But as far as your basic commoners go, I would suggest your fisher folk should be halflings or gnomes.
Okay.
My reasoning for that is there's a lot of aquatic going on, a lot of sea monsters and creatures and things. The fish population is going to be low.
Yeah.
Which means if these are your fisher folk, those fish have to go a little bit further than they would with Goliaths or Furbolg. I would say it'd be really cool to have them be halflings or gnomes. Your players aren't going to see that coming, and it doesn't have to be whimsical. Halflings are just short humans in 5th edition, which fucking frustrates me, but that's how you get humans without it being human, right?
And it makes more sense to say, as you pull into this shallow lagoon, you see what appears to be a kelp farm, and there's halflings working it. Okay, that kind of makes more sense than the Goliaths are out there sinking in the fucking mud.
Yeah, and the other side of it too is that the ships, the little rowboats and stuff, will not be useful to your party.
No. And that's kind of a difficulty on its own of how do you, and I mean, that's a difficulty with any dread domain, in my opinion. How do you enable travel where travel is still dangerous and the mists still seem to be a difficulty? Because like, I never understood in Barovia, your party can travel through the mists on the main roads with no problem. Apparently nobody else can.
I didn't even want to get started with that. I just assume that it's one of those things like, hey, you have enough hit dice to make it. Like,
yeah, I mean,
your heroes of legend, your fates are better than. And I had to include magical tattoos and runes that my party doesn't know where they come from or what they mean, so that when everybody else gets put to sleep, my characters are still up and moving around. When everybody else is getting levels of exhaustion, my guys are resistant to it. The NPCs can suffer and they need to be rescued without my party getting a TPK'd, right? So I had to invent that shit to get past this. Why can they walk through the mists? Why are they able to lift these heavy things and others can't? Right?
They just fucking can't. Yeah, and I see that as a thing. I see a lot of DMs struggling with that when I'm on Reddit of how do I get my party together? How do I keep them interested? Just fucking tell them, hey, you're a party. You all know each other. You work together. Yeah, fiat the existence party. Don't worry about the logic. In 3 sessions, nobody's gonna fucking remember.
Yeah. Okay, so for another group of random civilians, have you looked at all? I keep going back to Ravnica. You got Simic hybrids. Sorry?
I do not have that book. That is one of the few I don't have.
It's pretty fucking solid. I'm not gonna lie.
I've got it on my list. I was gonna go buy it, and then that whole OGL thing happened, and
that turned everybody off of giving wizards money, and I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But you don't need anything. You can Google search exactly how this works. Vedalken or Vedalken, depending on who you're talking to, are blue-skinned, partly amphibious creatures that are hyper intelligent. They're usually lawful. They live to the age of 500, and they are kind of like they're almost like Vulcan in their attitudes towards being precise about things and being intelligent and knowing the right way to do things. And we've got an episode coming out on them if we haven't released it already. No, it's coming in the next few weeks. But they're blue-skinned, completely hairless humanoids that are a little bit taller than humans, but they absorb oxygen through their skin. They can breathe underwater for up to an hour.
Okay.
And so they're almost aquatic, but it never comes up in the Ravnica book. Like, clearly they evolved from something aquatic or something amphibious anyway.
Yeah.
But they might as well be human, but there's a handful of differences that you can see in society.
Okay. Vidalken.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was thinking about your armadas that got sunk.
Yeah.
One of the most underutilized playable races, in my opinion, is the Hobgoblin.
Yes.
And they're very militaristic. And I think that one of the armadas being goblinoid would be a really cool way of adding flavor. And if their ghosts come back, what do those ghost ships look like? A goblinoid ghost armada, right? It's going to be a little bit different, and all of their flavor still works just fine for the goblin swabbing the poop deck and the shitty bosun who's a bugbear and the captain's a hobgoblin, right?
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love the idea of a ghost goblinoid armada that maybe doesn't even realize they're ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
And then, I mean, honestly, every population is in every book is at least 30% human. Like, right. So I think you could probably flesh out with humans and elves, and there's a Goliath working behind the bar, and like you could just multicultural the rest of it if you wanted by standard D&D tropes. I'm wondering what sea dwarves would look like, or coastal dwarves.
Yeah.
Right. If you wanted to, like, we have sea elves, we've got a million different kinds of elves. We have hill, mountain, and Durgar for dwarves, right? Would you homebrew together a coastal dwarf to fill up those ranks?
I could see homebrewing a coastal dwarf, and if I had the time and the effort, I would really lay into the dwarf mining aspect. Hey, these guys mine. They want precious metals. They want precious gems. They want to be deep in something. I would put a ocean-based dwarf culture surrounding a event down on the bottom of the ocean, where they've got the heat to keep their forges going, and I would homebrew a version of the giant flail snail. Yeah. There's a breed. Love a good flail snail. We all do.
Yeah.
It's a breed of snail that lives. It's an extremophile that lives on the vents that actually grows iron scales. I think it's the iron foot snail.
Yeah, I have looked into this. They're badass as all.
They're badass. And you want to talk about, the dwarves are down there and they're making iron. How? They've got an iron flail snail farm that they're running. And then, that's a whole subject on its own. But
yeah, but it wouldn't take much to simplify it for your domain of dread, where these are dwarves and they're divers. And instead of gems, they're all about coral.
Right. And
they maintain a coral reef outside of their lagoon, their bay, their whatever, if you wanted to flesh that out. So I'm just trying to think. Barovia had essentially 4 populated places to really go.
Yeah.
And I'm really stretching that by saying 4 because I'm including the Vistani. Do you have anybody like the Vistani? You said you've got your Madame Eva, but you don't really have those built-in mystical allies anywhere.
No, and I didn't. So I'll be
I don't
honest
think
with
you need them.
I don't think I need them. And I personally, the Vistani to me, the way I run them, they're not allies. So I didn't even think of that.
Sure.
But no, I didn't. I didn't include any of that. That wouldn't be a bad idea. People that can travel the mists. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think who's going to. We don't want them to be able to travel through the mist, so we don't need the Vistani. We don't need that in this at all. I'm just trying to think who's going to be their struggling commoners that need help. The were ravens, right?
Right. I would say it's probably the ships of the fleet in some way, shape, or form, because I imagine that the ships are going to have to earn their position in the fleet over and over and over again. And if they've got a bad run on fishing or they got a bad run on salvage, that'll become difficult. And all of the settlements are going to rely on this is the only form of, call it trade or travel we have.
Oh, hold on. What about how much undead are you injecting into this?
I was imagining with the Mummy Lord that all of her cult would be undead. So a fair amount there, and then
Ghost ships, skeletons, and corpses.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of undead, right?
Yeah.
What if the people trying to be saved are the ghosts that have been killed by her that just want to be put to rest?
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah.
And the last thing, when you kill them, they disapparate, and the last thing that they get is the small whisper with a high enough perception check, small whisper of a thank you as they're put to rest. But then, of course, every time that the cycle resets, they're back.
Yes. No, I like that. I'm trying to think. I guess that would be another.
I don't think that that's your main, like, people to be rescued, your main victims, but it would be another layer to add on to it.
I could see that being the atoll settlement above the destroyed city.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't realize those are ghosts. These friendly people that are trying to help you, but seem to be stuck in a loop, and all of your ship is destroyed and you come back. That's weird. They're doing the exact same thing they did when we left.
Yeah.
That's weird. They're having the same festival. That's weird. She's in labor again. Wait a minute. And then, okay. And then you can introduce the Kraken priests as that this guy's different than before. And see if they notice, you walk into the bar, there's 9 people in the tavern. Third time. You walk in the bar, there's 9 people in the tavern. 5th time. You walk in the bar, there's 10 people in the tavern. What'd you say?
Yeah. I got to play with that a little bit with the false Hydra as well. So that was pretty fun. I just had an idea and I lost it now. Festivals are the thing that we always do. It should be a seasonal marketplace or an election or Memorial Day, a day of mourning. Day of mourning actually feels a little bit better. Yeah. And it could just be a day of mourning for a ship that sunk 3,000 years ago. There's nothing to do with this at all. It's just let's drive home again how dangerous the oceans are.
You can do that. I would want to somehow make it something that sort of bothered the Dark Lord. It's a festival everybody celebrates, everybody knows about, and it bothers the Dark Lord. This is the day the Kraken went to sleep. And it just, we're celebrating the slumber of the Kraken, and just drives home, you're not fucking doing this.
Well, it's the memorial of the last ship that was sunk by the Kraken before she went to sleep.
Yeah. So something like that.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would I want to spread out the time a little bit, because something that bothers me about a lot of D&D games is the urgency that is implied but is not real, that then prevents any sort of I decide I want to explore.
Yeah.
So spoilers for every D&D game, but like Lost Mines of Phandelver, it starts with Gundren is captured. You got to get Gundren. Okay. 4 weeks later, you find him? No, you got 24 hours and that motherfucker's dead. That's how that works. Storm King's Thunder. Oh, the giants are going to destroy everything. Now you read the book, you got all the time in the world. They're not doing anything. So
the only one that I found is an appropriate level of threat is the Tomb of Annihilation, because there's not a thing that's impending doom. It's just resurrection magic is broken. People aren't healing right. Fix that shit. Right. So
to that end, I think I would do the festival of the last ship the Kraken destroyed, or the day the Kraken was put to sleep, or it would all revolve around that. I might actually do a different festival for every settlement that's essentially the exact same thing, just from a different lens. And I would tie the festival around the arrival of the corpse and her court.
Have you? Sorry, keep going.
I was going to say, I want the court to only hit a settlement maybe every 3 or 4 months. I want it to be slow in between so that there's time to find those riches for tribute, to find those sacrifices, to whatever. And also, I want to give the players an opportunity to say, hey, we need to get on this at this time. It's going to be a few months. You have time to do subplots and side quests and things like that, because I don't want them to rush through it, because when I go back and think of Curse of Strahd, hey, my players have gone from level 1 to level 8 or 10 by the end of it in what is probably 5 weeks of game time.
Yeah.
Fuck, that's fast.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I do a lot of overland travel. And honestly, if you just make your domain large enough, with the inability to properly sail, right?
Yeah.
Then that is going to eat up a lot of time.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do in my random encounters, I've got a table to see how many hours pass, and if I wanted to zoom way out, how many days pass as well. So it's always 2d4 days, because that's 7 options, right?
Yeah.
So that's a week, and then how many hours go by, right? So when they travel, I can say, hey, this much time passed. During that time, you guys had this noteworthy encounter with this NPC. Everything else, what did you guys do for 6 days? How did you fill the time? Right. And then give them the agency there.
We rode for 12 hours a day because there's no fucking wind. Oh, okay. You all have 4 levels of exhaustion because you rode for 4. Sorry, I didn't make the rules. I did, but whatever.
I wanted to ask, how's your Kraken asleep?
How?
Yeah, like what's keeping the Kraken from, like, I know that, like, if it gets disturbed it'll wake up, but is it magic? And if so, who's magic?
So I have no idea. And I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna go back to I wouldn't have originally gone with the Kraken is asleep and you got to keep it asleep. But as I mentioned, I'm a recent father, and so I'm struggling with getting a baby to go to sleep and keeping it asleep. And actively keeping something asleep is impossible. I have no fucking idea how you do that. So I mean, I'm gonna say some level of god magic. I mean, the goddess of the sea put it to sleep because she needs it as a weapon in a future fight, and she says, hey, don't wake it up. And also, I don't want it to wake up because I don't want you to have to kill it, because in a fight between an ancient dragon turtle and a kraken, it's about a 50-50 fight right there. It'll wreck everything around it. I mean, that would be just cataclysmic, but maybe I need this later, so keep it locked up for me. And poof, I did it. And now, because I'm a god, I'm going to fuck off and not explain myself.
You have listed Umberly as your...
Yeah, I pulled that out of one of the tables, Goddess of the Sea.
I think
back in the player's manual.
I think we can make it weirder. Give me 1 sec. I am... Are they at the beginning or the end of the... there we go.
Yes. In
Princes of the Apocalypse, Ol Hydra is the water-based Prince of the Apocalypse. Now, she's an elemental evil. Is it she? Yeah, she's an elemental evil. But there's no reason that you can't repurpose this literal living wave to have put the Kraken down. And given the level of fear into the, like, and maybe that's what your Dark Lord's afraid of, is Ol Hydra will come back and punish me.
Right. I think I originally went with a god because it's almost a Game of Thrones. You've done a great job, and so I reward you with this service you must perform in my name. But I like that better. I like Ol Hydra better.
I would also absolutely not use the stat block and just make it up on your own, because the stat block for Ol Hydra is CR 18. So, like, I'm happy to homebrew. And I don't think Ol Hydra will ever show up, right? Like, Ol Hydra was the one that put them to, and maybe it was Ol Hydra's cultists, or there was a sacrifice or a tribute or something on the last ship that sunk by the Kraken. Maybe Ol Hydra was sent them to their doom and they didn't know it. Or, I need uh 10 volunteers, 2 from each settlement, to board this ship to die, so the Kraken will go to sleep. And that's why each one of the settlements has a different festival honoring 1 or 2 people from their settlement that made that sacrifice.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
So yeah, is there anything else that's standing out to you that is needs to be workshopped to make this feel a little bit more fleshed out or ready to be presented to players?
I mean, I'd like to work a couple of subplots or side quests to get them in on, but more so, I've got that other considerations at the bottom that I think, I mean, I'd love to workshop it, but then it's applicable to only my players, and I recognize you have
no, that's totally cool.
Yeah. So, well, I think the other considerations is important because there's a lot of stuff that comes up as a DM, especially when you're creating a dreaded domain, and all the things people try to do as a DM because they see, oh, a famous DM does this. And they don't realize it's scripted. You know, I like character backstories. That's always interesting to me. I see that a lot on the subreddits of, I've got these 6 different disparate character backstories. How do I weave them into my narrative?
Yeah.
And in a domain of dread, how the hell do you do that? And my answer is you don't.
I don't think so. So I look at how I hand out magic items, and I do it tier by tier, where tier 1 is based on the flavor of your character, because this is when you're exploring and figuring out who your character is. Tier 2 is when I give you the mechanic that leans into your subclass, because this is why you built the character that you wanted to. Tier 3 is, here is the item that or the boon or blessing or whatever that leans into the story. So far you've come so far from level 1 and you're still alive, and you've saved this village, you've saved that prince, you've killed that enemy. Here's this item to show, like, it's not enough to just have, I have a sword of +2 dragon slaying. No, this was the sword you drove through the dragon's heart, and it now has a +2 on it, right?
Yeah.
And then tier 4 is, here's the item you need to end the campaign. Here's the MacGuffin that you weren't aware that you needed beforehand. I usually reveal the MacGuffin really late game. Otherwise, it becomes the focus of the entire thing, and you end up spending all of Curse of Strahd looking for a fucking amulet and a fucking sword. So right, like so that's how I think about it, especially when it comes to plot hooks as well. Is the first one is, you're still learning your character.
Yes.
The plot hook isn't about the characters, it's about the players.
Yes. Yeah. You're playing into the individual playing the game, because the characters, I don't care how well developed the backstory is. I don't want a perfectly developed backstory. That is a character that has no growth. Their story is done. Give me somebody who has something to work with. And if I can maybe lean on, I love D&D because it's something that you can use to work on facets of your own personality and improve on them in a safe environment. And, use your characters to do that. That's wonderful. And yeah, don't bring me a complete backstory. Give me one with growth and room. And I think it's important to realize when DMs are looking at a backstory, one, we touched on this earlier, everybody's going to give you different levels of a backstory. Someone's going to give you 2 lines. I want to be the most powerful, and that's it. And there's no definition, there's no achievable goals, whatever. And someone else is going to give you 35 pages, and someone's going to give you the, I was prophesized as the greatest ever, and my village was attacked, and I killed them all, and I'm known as Dark Lord Star Saber, and I'm the most feared man in the country, even though I'm level 1 or whatever. And it's really difficult to then, as a DM, try to reshape your narrative to fit that. And I don't think you necessarily need to. I think it's important to realize as a DM, the adventure they're on now, that actually might be their character backstory for when they're level 10. These are the first 8 levels of their backstory. This is where they get that driving character piece.
This is why I play from level 1, right? Everyone likes to start at level 3 or level 5, but I play at level 1 because we need to see how these characters react when they're fucked. And that's like, people bemoan that about 5th edition. You're the weakest at the very beginning. You're going to die. It's the deadliest then. And you walk around like gods late game, when it should be the opposite. It's safe early and it becomes more dangerous as you go. And my perspective on that is always, we learn the characters when they have made death saves 3 times this session, and they have 1 health potion left. Who are they going to save? When I did the False Hydra episodes, which I know this is going to be on the public channel, so not everybody knows that backstory, but
yeah,
I lost 3 characters out of my 5.
yeah.
Party's bigger than that, but the players at the table at the time, there were 5 players. 3 of those characters died. And that left me with Megan and Dan. Dan, who'd given me this big ass backstory, multi-pages long, about I'm a Furbolg from Ravnica. What Furbolgs aren't from Ravnica? How did I end up here? Why do I consider the shifter in the party to be my long lost brother? And like I've got literally 23 siblings, and my mother takes care of us all. And we technically work for the cult of Rakdos, but we don't understand that we work for the cult of bondage, pain, and blood orgies. So we're just circus hands that go up ahead of time and set up the stages and give this whole big thing. Megan said, I am the prophesized princess that will defend the green dragon and save the world. Fuck. And these are the 2 that lived.
Yeah.
Now, I am sitting at a point in my campaign where they're the only 2 that are left. And we just left it on a huge cliffhanger where Lolth showed up and the party was split. 1 character's captured, and Dan's character is hiding where no one can get to him. And Megan's character escaped with everybody else. She's going to be away for the next month. And she's like, well, if I can be honest, my character wouldn't sit still and become a background player. My character would go rescue the only remaining friend that has been traveling with her for the last 4 months. She has nothing left to live for. She found out that her prophecy was false flag. She found out that her best friend was murdered by this false Hydra, and she can't even remember half of the shit that they were best friends about. She needs to get this character back. So we play on Sundays. Tomorrow night on Friday, I've got Megan and Dan coming over to play a special episode to bring their characters together, because he is I love everybody and I just want everyone to be happy Furbolg bard, and she is a monk with rage issues. And they have built this backstory together in tier 1 that they never would have had before. And that is why it's important to not worry about the plot hooks for the characters, because they're going to get rewritten. Yeah. It's important to say, what do the players want? The players, Dan wants to make sure that the other characters see him as a friend and ally. And Megan wants everybody to know that she's the toughest one in the room. I don't have to give them anything for a plot hook. Besides, Dan's in danger and he's your friend, right? That fulfills everything they need.
You don't have to give them a plot hook. You don't have to say, oh, so-and-so for your backstory showed up and they're pulling you in this. And, oh, it turns out that the big bad actually was manipulating your father the whole time. And, oh, blah, blah. No, you don't need to do any of that. So I think it's important to say that up front, because I know a lot of DMs struggle with that. I see on the Curse of Strahd Reddit, the number of people who are like, oh, these are my 5 backstories. How do I weave them into Barovia? And the answer is, with the Domain of Dread, you fucking don't. That's the point.
For your specific Domain of Dread, I would say there is a merchant ship named blank.
Yes.
There were 6 people that are the crew. Give me a reason why you are on it. And then at the beginning of session 1, I narrate, the captain knows that we'll lose 5 days if we go around the storm, but if we go through these mists, and then you wake up on the shores of whatever, right? And that's all you need.
Is there a reason you're traveling from point A to point B? There is. Cool. It's on a boat and there's some mist. You wake up, the captain's confused about the stars because they're not there. Oh, look, there's a lighthouse, and I'm using my lighthouse as my death house.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Oh, you lit the lighthouse? Cool. You've attracted the sea serpent. The sea serpent's attacking. Oh no, we're going to be killed by the sea serpent. Oh, look at that. The corpse of a giant fucking dragon turtle's rolling by, scares off the sea serpent. There's the big bad. Oh shit, now the fleet's there. But yeah, you don't need to find individuals from the backstories and weave them in. You can just make, I touched on it earlier. Oh, do your dark reflections as reflections of the characters. No, don't do that. Make it agnostic and then pull them in.
Yeah, and give the players what they want, that feel from the beginning. They chose to be a barbarian because they wanted a flavor that is a barbarian. They chose to be a circle of spores versus a circle of the moon. They chose spores for a reason. Let them do that early on. And you can't do that in session one. You can't give them that plot hook that early. So just figure out what the players are trying to get out of D&D. Some people want beer and pretzels, some people want heartache, right? Yeah. And hopefully they all get on the same page, but I've never known that to happen.
I've never seen it to happen. No.
So that's yeah, when it comes to bringing them all together, honestly, you have kind of two options with it. One is, do you let them explore the wilderness first, or do they get to a town right away and understand they're somewhere they shouldn't be?
Right.
Do they find the clues in tier one that slowly, wait a minute, those constellations are wrong, right? Like that kind of shit. Or do they walk into a tavern and there's nobody there and it happens to be the ghost town, or like, and they find the map of where they are? Like, how do they get introduced to the domain?
So for this one in particular, I would say I would do what I just laid out. Lighthouse as your death house, get you from level 1 to level 2 or level 3. And then you get picked up by the fleet.
Yeah.
And then the fleet, someone kind of on the fleet, I would go with somebody who's loosely friendly. You're not getting picked up by the pegheads because they're just going to kill your fucking players, and then you're going to have to deal with shit.
Yeah.
Somebody friendly who then sort of explains, oh yeah, we're going to so-and-so, we're going to the next town. Oh, you're new. They're going to want to meet you. And then that forces that introduction to the Dark Lord. And so I guess the last two things from kind of what I had that I wanted to touch on that I see a lot of people kind of asking questions about are the prophecies. And I have difficulty with prophecies because my players always interpret prophecies as plot armor. Hey, the prophecy said I'm the one who's going to do this. I'm invulnerable. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And
my players, I've drilled it home. There are two kinds of prophecy. Destiny and fate. Your destiny is to step forward and be the savior of the land and live up to your father's name and wield the sword of whatever. That is how your life should go.
Right.
Will you see your destiny through and have it become your fate? Or will you go astray? Will you not make it that far? Right. The gods say this is your destiny, but it's up to you to determine your fate. And that is how I would literally have your prophecy character, whoever your Madame Eva is, sit there and go, hey, look, yeah, this is plot armor. That's great. I have bad news for you.
So my Madame Eva, the reason I run Curse of Strahd so much is I love playing Madame Eva. I like to think I do a good Madame Eva. But yeah, I always inform them. I always massage it. You are the pebble that starts the avalanche. You might not make it to the bottom.
No.
You are going to start. Someone's going to finish it. It might be you. It might be somebody else. And really drive home, as the DM, I'm not going to kill you. Your fucking stupid decisions are going to kill you. That's your own goddamn fault. So
the thing that I've done, see, I love prophecies. I play with them all the time. I literally just introduced the 3 Greek fates as triplet girls that are blind, that sometimes speak in unison and know things they shouldn't know. And everyone's very scared that my players have figured out that I named them after the 3 fates, but they're like, are they hags? What's happening here? But they need to interact with these triplets, and they're all like 15 years old. So they eat too much and they want to talk about ridiculous, stupid shit, and like to tell us the story of it. And not like, I don't undermine them when I say ridiculous, stupid shit, just unimportant things, right? Their scope is different than everybody else's. But every time that I ask them for anything, do you have this? It's going to impact. Now that they gave up 1 ration, you will run out of rations later. The fates are actually impacting the shit that's happening. And so they know that's going on. At the same time, they've got these runic god magic tattoos on their arms, and they know that it's letters that spell a thing. But they just lost a bunch of people, and the survivors felt agonizing pain as their runes shifted and changed and warped their flesh and became new runes, because their fates are different now. And that's the kind of shit that I would have. Like, if there's a scroll that says the 5 of you will do the thing and save the people and do the whatever, I would have a picture of the 5 of them at the top. And then when one of them dies, that fades away and a new image shows up. Right. So you are not the best. You're just the best we got.
Yeah. You're starting a path.
Yeah.
Who knows who's going to finish it? Hopefully it's you. And I really hope it's you, because introducing backup characters in a Domain of Dread is a pain in the ass, and is something every DM has to consider. But
I would ask them outright for their new character. How did you drown? When and why?
for mine, absolutely. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. Hold on, writing that down as well. How did you drown?
And then they just say, even if they drown in a bathtub, when suddenly once they've given up, they can feel the water filling their lungs, and they're falling like into the depths of the dark of the ocean, or into the bottom of the bathtub. Suddenly there's a spark in their head. They raise up, they take a deep breath, and find themselves on a beach.
And how do all of the locals refer to adventurers? Oh, you're one of the drowned.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Wait, are there others? What do you mean? I haven't drowned. Oh, yeah, you're one of the drowned.
And that's another cool thing that Curse of Strahd does. It's really, really subtle. Is there's a funeral procession that's a bunch of ghosts, right? And I've always flavored it that those are the heroes that have tried this in the past and died. We're in an infinite loop. So, like, at the end of the day, you drown. And when one of the characters dies, if you can recover the body, burial at sea.
So my players in Curse of Strahd have seen some of their previous characters in that march.
Cool. So, yeah, good.
They've seen them go by. I had a player who did a fantastic job building up her character. She was a warlock tiefling, but she had started as a halfling. And when she went warlock by accident, she became a tiefling.
Nice.
And she saw her. The other players did not know that when the ghost procession went by and there was this halfling ghost who seemed to be screaming at them as she was dragged along by the rest, they didn't really pick it up. I would anybody listening, I would say that if you really want a really creepy ghost procession, there was an episode of the HBO show Carnival where they went to Babylon.
Yes, you are the only person I've met out in the wild that has actually seen this show.
Fantastic show. Fantastic.
I wish it had an ending.
God, oh yeah, no, Clancy Brown.
Yeah.
Not him there. Clancy Brown portrays a character in the cartoon show The Venture Brothers as the Red Death.
Yeah.
That's my Strahd. That's nice. Who I play as Strahd. And it's phenomenal. I love that man. But yeah, Carnival, if you're going to do a Domain of Dread, watch that show and you will get a feel for just pain and misery and difficult stagnation. So Dark Lord introduction. I'm gonna pivot here. I know you've said before on some of your other shows, you want the big bad to be showing up in the first couple of episodes so they know who it is.
Yep.
So I wanted to kind of pick your brain. How do you introduce a Dark Lord in a way that does not show too much interest in the party? Like, you don't have Strahd drop a note and say, hey, come visit me, you're interested, because he's the Lord of all Barovia. He's seen hundreds, thousands of adventurers come and go as hundreds of years. He doesn't give a shit.
Strahd doesn't care about the adventurers until they get in the way of him saving Irina.
Yes.
So using that model, and that's one of the good things that Curse of Strahd does. But using that model, your players are going to be what, level 1? They are barely commoners. They might as well be. They're like the strongest man in the bar, but there are lots of bars. So they're just going to be in the procession of people to provide tribute. And maybe they sit there and panic, and that's the first NPC they run into who says, look, here's the tribute you need to give, and hands it to them and says, you owe me, but I'll get you through this. And then they get face to face, they provide the tribute, and you just narrate the cutscene for them. And your Dark Lord is disinterested. And as they're leaving, the Dark Lord becomes interested in an NPC for good or for bad, and interacts in a big, scary show of power one way or the other. So your players go, holy shit, we just sidestepped something big. Yeah. I wouldn't have that show of power before they meet. that needs to be after, because if it's before, they'll try to roll initiative, right?
Well, so I think I agree. I completely agree. You want to avoid a situation where your players decide, I'm going to try combat, I'm going to try a challenge, I'm going to try a joke, and then this person's going to fucking kill me.
But I mean, it's easy enough to do where everyone stands in a long ass line and a priest comes by and touches them each on the forehead and casts hold person.
It is. For my particular one, I mentioned earlier, I think that something that Dai Fang, my Dark Lord, would be desperate for is information from the outside world about the Kraken. So when they're introduced, we've discovered the Drowned, we have to report this. We have to push you forward so they can ask you, do you know? But to do that display of power, display of strength that they don't argue with, I mentioned earlier, I would have my players enter a lighthouse. And when they light the lighthouse, the sea serpent showed up. And they're level 2. The sea serpent is going to destroy them. And you have this almost Kurgan Ramirez Highlander scene of they're in a lighthouse tower. There's a thing wrapping around it. It's crumbling. It's fighting. And then as the corpse drifts by, almost casually, the Dark Lord annihilates that threat and just keeps. And it's like, oh, that thing that was threatening our lives, they didn't even blink about killing it.
As Dave likes to say, there's always a bigger fish. In this case, almost literally.
Right. So I think introducing your players into a situation where the Dark Lord has an introduction because they're interested in a piece of information, but they're not actually interested in the characters is good. And then also, it's almost a save. Hey, the Dark Lord saved you casually from some death thing. Not, and Strahd sends you a letter and says, I want to have dinner. I'm interested in you, and blah, 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 blah. Because, okay.
I feel like the corpse of the dragon turtle floats by in the background for like 4 or 5 rounds and then suddenly stops.
Yeah.
And then there's a light from a structure on its back, or the fogs part, and you can see a shadow of a figure, that's standing there in the moonlight or whatnot, that raises their hand, and suddenly the sea serpent is sushi, right? Like, but it's got to be from a distance. So like, even wait a minute, wouldn't that be this spell? But the range is only 60 feet, and they did it at 600, right? Like, that level of. You could also telegraph the Mummy Lord shit if you wanted to cast Disintegrate because you gave that to your Mummy Lord, or Insect Plague. So the like swarms come up and eat this thing alive or whatever.
Yeah.
Drive the clues early, right?
Yeah. Or even it wasn't even targeting the sea serpent. It was targeting the lighthouse. And the sea serpent got in the way and just fucking destroyed the light.
Yeah.
Something about that. But I think the introduction of the Dark Lord should be not necessarily ignorant of the players and the characters, but just completely uncaring. I don't give a shit.
Disinterested needs to be the name of the game for sure.
Yes. Hey, survive a couple of weeks, and then maybe I'm curious.
I would even say disinterested. They're, because of the paranoia, nothing they say or do is going to be important until they get the first canopic jar.
Yes.
So they will feel the presence of the Dark Lord. They will have visions and dreams of what's happened in the past. They will get to talk to ghosts and populations, and they will always know what the Domain of Dread is about, but they won't really get that face-to-face fuck you moment, like we are now enemies, until they get the first canopic jar. So I almost think like they got to come across that by accident, or they've got to be put on that path by an NPC on purpose, right?
And they almost need to be warned. The second that the Dark Lord figures this out, you are a target. Mm-hmm. And when I say you're a target, I mean you're fucked. Hide this.
I almost feel like you've got the problem of, if she knows when one of the jars has been taken, why doesn't she go right after that person? And so there has to be something that is like, if you fill the jar with seawater, then she cannot sense it any longer. So you pick it up in whatever the chamber is, and you have it, and the sea turtle shifts and starts moving towards that direction. And then they get to the shore, fill it with seawater, and fuck off. And then 2 days later, she shows up and says, "Where's my jar?"
You always need to stay ahead of it. You
Yeah.
always need to stay ahead of the bow wave of her course because she's figured it out. No, I treated in Curse of Strahd, my favorite moment in D&D, all of D&D and all playing is what I'm going to talk about now. I treated the Sun Sword in Curse of Strahd the same way. Hey, the second this gets known and the word gets back to Strahd, that's it. Everything else gets put to the side.
Yeah.
This is focus. And so my players got the Sun Sword in Valakai, and they went toe-to-toe with the vampire spawn in Valakai. And I looked at the stat box and said, hey, you got above a 10 intelligence. I'm going to play you intelligently. And the wielder of the Sun Sword chased after a vampire spawn who was trying to escape because they were going to report to Strahd, hey, they've got a weapon of sunlight. And long story short, they got themselves separated. The vampire spawn turned at bay and took the fucking Sun Sword away from the unconscious person. They got it back, but the gasp from my party of the vampire spawn is going in for the kill on this rogue. No. They scoop up the Sun Sword and they dash into the woods.
And these are good, like, key moments to do as well with the canopic jars. Like, they come back and
Yes.
find they're gone. They've been raided, right? Like, there's some having MacGuffins doesn't mean that like you're the only people going after them, as the Indiana Jones movies has taught us over and over.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
But that's a lot of fun. That and it brings me back to the idea that she's got spies. Her paranoia is enough that like maybe even one of the quest givers is one of her spies, right?
Yeah.
To
That's
see,
fantastic.
Hey, you got 2 of the canopic jars. This person knows what the third one is. You got to go talk to them. They're working for her to see if you're actually capable of doing it, and they're going to double cross you at the last minute, trap you in, and flood the chamber or whatever where you are.
Yeah.
Like that Cave of Wonders double cross. So, I guess there's one last thing on this list before we wrap. Okay, 2 last things. Yeah. First of all, there's you have a list, I put on the breakdown about magic items and the economy. I would not worry about the economy.
Yeah, ignore that. I wrote that, and then I looked back at the actual Van Richten CI, and it said ignore that. So
yeah, you like it's good enough to know that it works, that it exists. Yeah. And I would just keep it like a Domain of Dread has to be low magic item.
Yeah.
Just otherwise, there's too much shit popping off. Unless you're doing whatever that domain was that is about the high magic. I'm trying to remember now. That's falling apart at the sea.
Archon?
Is it Archon?
Darkon's one of the ones falling apart. At the Lich that has departed.
Yes, and the whole area is falling apart and getting ripped apart by the seams at a cosmic level. So
awesome.
So yeah, I would absolutely put lots of magic items in there, but that's rare. I wouldn't do it normally.
No.
But no, the other one that's on here is nightmares. You've got phenomena to list out, and you've got some pretty detailed nightmares.
Yeah.
Why nightmares? Why did you latch on? Because you latched on hard to nightmares.
So that's a holdover from Curse of Strahd, and I felt it was good in the Death House. Hey, you're going to sleep here. It was an early introduction to everything's terrible. Everything's horrible here, and it is creeping into your mind. It was one of those things that I wanted to use to really reinforce this is not going to be, for your character, pleasant. And so I feel, hey, you're here, you're in a domain of dread. This is a reflection of the Dark Lord, and their psyche is imprinting on everything around. Why not include a table of nightmares? And the table I have there is the one I use for Curse of Strahd. And I'll tell you why you don't use it is because I gave one of my players a literal anxiety attack middle game, and we had to stop because apparently I hit unknowingly too close to home with one of my nightmares. But you, as a DM, you're always looking for immersion.
Yeah.
And when you're in combat or you're in a social situation or even an exploratory one, your player is going to stop listening and they're going to be looking at their character sheet. They're going to be looking at what I can do, their spell list, their inventory, whatever. So Nightmares gives you that canvas, that opportunity to say, hey, put your character sheet down, listen to my voice. Now close your eyes, and this is happening while you're asleep. Your character's perfectly safe. However, and then you can walk that player down that scary path or whatever, and all the other players are listening and really drive home this is a domain of dread. And for me, the interesting thing was I did that to one player, and then the rest of the players said, nope, we're not going to sleep. We're staying awake for reasons. And okay, you're all staying awake all night in Dread House or Death House. Fine, whatever.
You've got such evocative language because you scripted out for, what is it, 6 of them so far? And you've got a random table of 20. And it's stuff like, it's funny, the names of them are so like unassuming. Laughter approaches, mold, ghost lights, right? And then it gets worse and worse as you go. Screaming skinless child. Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. That's great. Here's my suggestion, because I use nightmares in mine as well. The closer they get to the goddess of death, the worse their nightmares are, the more that they get corrupted as well. So here's how I do it, and it's different than how you do it. I like your method, and again, I would love to read one of these out, but they're so freaking long. And we're running long already.
Yeah.
But they're so good. These are whole cutscenes, right? For people to not just listen to, but breathe in, right? Like they're there to experience this, and you got away with words. It's really good.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
The way that I build it is I mine their backstory, and their backstory will change, but I get like essentially a D6 table of a location or a person or an item, and that location can be home or the school where I learned my wizarding technique or my favorite teacher. And I'll send out at the beginning a questionnaire really quickly about who, besides your parents, who is the most influential person in your life? Who do you like the least, right? Like, who is your rival growing up? And so I throw all this stuff out and I get a bunch of answers back. Then I build a D6 table. And then I build a D6 table that's based on my Dark Lord or whatever, like the tragedies that happened as well, whether it's an armada being sunk or a city being flooded or sacrifices being happened or like going on, right? Like dragon turtles being ripped apart, or a lineup of people on the beach ready to walk into the water to die, or like whatever it is, all these horrific things from her backstory. And then I add in a handful of other details that are based on the campaign that they've done so far.
Yeah.
And then I roll dice, and I roll dice as if I'm casting bones, and each one of the tables is a different color of die, and they're all like D6 tables, D4 tables, really small. And but I start off with a D20 table. On a 1 to 15, you're going to have a bad dream. On a 16 to 19, you're going to wake up screaming. On a 20, you've been sleepwalking, and one of your items at random is destroyed from your backpack.
Ow.
Now, normally I keep that down to like the pot and pan that they chose at the Explorer's Guide at the beginning, right?
Your six canisters of oil that you took for some reason. Your ball bearings. Yeah.
You've been sitting there snapping candles, right? Like that kind of shit. So just enough to make it unnerving that they would have been destroying their own shit. And then I roll where I cast the bones. So it's the first one is you're in a location that you recognize from earlier in this campaign, and this person from your backstory is there, and they're talking with you, and they seem, and then I roll on a random table, happy, angry, sad, but a lot of it's very simple, and they're not angry at you, they're just mad, and you go over to talk to them and whatnot. But when this happens, the world turns dark and waters begin to swell upward, and it turns the normal that they would normally be dreaming about is now invaded by the will of the Dark Lord, reliving their horror.
That's fantastic. And I believe the definition of grotesque, and I'm wildly wrong on this, but grotesque is, it's 99% normal, and the 1% is wrong, and that 1% is what's bothering you. Something is getting you. So I do my nightmares as descriptive as I can, because I find I only need to do them once.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time I say, you have a nightmare, would you like me to read it out? And all of my players say, no, we're good. And they have that flashback. But I think what you're saying of doing that table, and also my nightmares are agnostic of the Dark Lord in this case. I just pulled the ones I've used previously as examples, and
Yeah.
I think it would be valuable to, you could build on them. You have a dream, you're talking to somebody, you don't really understand it. The next, you have a dream, you're talking to somebody, it's not very clear. They seem to be carrying fishing gear. The next one, oh, they're carrying fishing gear. The water is rising around your feet. And you can kind of build on that, and you can almost use that as, if you wanted to drive them to the prophet Soliton in my case. But
also the slow building horror of it too. Like the first time you're on the pier and you're talking, the second time you're laughing, the third time it's a manic laughter and there's panic in their eyes, the fourth time they're screaming, the fifth time they're grasping at your jacket as the water rises around them and they're panicking, trying to climb up your body, and then on the sixth time they're pushing you under.
Yes, and if you really want to screw, and as all DMs do, we really want to screw with our players. If you really want to screw with your player, oh, you're all going to sleep, everybody roll whatever. Oh, you rolled this? Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break. When you come back, I'm going to describe your nightmare. Go get a drink, go to the bathroom, bio break, whatever you want to call it. When you get back, I'm going to describe your nightmare and let them think about it. Yeah, no, I love it.
Also, if when you have your D6 table of the people that are important to them, like in their backstory, 5 of them are from the backstory, or 4 of them are from the backstory. One of them is an NPC that they've been interacting with, and the last one is one of the other party members.
Hold on. Yep.
Because that right there will fuck with them. This person had a dream that I died. What? That is a nightmare that gives to 2 people.
What's also interesting, it creates, as much as you want to not create party tension, but you do want to create party tension for your own entertainment and for everything else, the narrative. Does the person tell the other one? Are they now looking for it? Are they worried that this is the prophecy? Is it going to change the way they act later? So yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Now, what I was doing in the last campaign, and I mean, it's an extra step that you don't have to do, but like I was looking at the fact that I had a gnome investigator and a rogue arcane trickster. There's a half elf. I had a dragonborn wizard, and then a human paladin. And when I was rolling out these nightmares, I thought to myself, okay, so the paladin has divine magic, so I will be rolling a D8, and it was a D10, and every time it's a 1, they get a nightmare.
Yeah.
Every time they go to bed. For the 2 arcane, which were the wizard and the arcane trickster, I was rolling D12s. If they roll a 1, they get a nightmare. And then for the gnome investigator, who just does not believe in this shit and is pragmatic and whatnot, it was a D20. And if they roll a 1, they get a nightmare. But then he took a level in warlock and proved that there was hags that he had made a deal with, and so like the magic was in him, and he could hear people's voices and stuff. And so he was suddenly very in tune with this, and now he was rolling a D6. So a much higher percent chance to roll a 1.
I think one that's fantastic is to loop in that level, and that's very good. I would never have thought of that, and I'm genuinely impressed, which I don't give away with my dead flat affect. But it gave me the idea that maybe also the players don't want to listen to the nightmares. You're going to be playing on anxieties, you're going to be playing on genuine fears, and you're going to go beyond impacting their character and impacting the human being playing the character, the player. You don't want to traumatize them for no reason. You don't want to introduce difficulty to them for no reason. So maybe, at least in my case, maybe introduce some unifying element. There's a ghost trying to get through with a concept, and the only way they can do it is a nightmare. Soliton, my quintessent. The only way he can get through is there's some unifying aspect of the nightmare that, oh, and on the wind you hear blank. And on the wind you hear blank. Oh, that's weird. I had a nightmare. Oh, I heard that too. Wait a minute.
I think that's where you get that table of, did they just wake up? Were they screaming in their sleep? Were they sleepwalking? Were there anybody else, whoever's on watch, because there's always someone on watch, will hear them speaking a clue, saying Soliton for the first time. We've never heard that word before. What does it mean? Right. And then that'll make them go, okay, I'm willing to endure this nightmare to get the clues.
Right.
So, and you could have a random table of clues. Actually, I myself as a DM would craft out what clues, because that can push them in an appropriate direction. And you're also checking the box for prophecies with this as well.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, as a DM, I lie every time I say I'm rolling randomly. I've planned it out. I've got the idea ahead of time. I don't fucking roll randomly. I mean, when it comes to plot, when it comes to things to advance it, I don't roll randomly. And I know that's a big problem with like Curse of Strahd. People roll randomly for the Traka deck and they end up with just garbage. I don't do that. So
I am a big believer of any time that I roll randomly for the plot, I do it at the end of a session so I can walk away and figure out how the fuck does that work over the next week or two. So
yeah.
So I will often roll randomly, and I roll about 90% of my dice in front of my players with the table on, like the random table, on the physical table where they can see it, and I will drag my finger down the table so they can see that this is truly random.
So I play primarily online, just because we're separated by hundreds of miles, so it's difficult. But I almost never hide my rolls, so the players know the brutality is what they have earned. So
yep, and that's the game. Why roll dice if you're not gonna follow them, right? So,
if you don't that being said, dice, write a book.
Yeah,
do a collaborative narrative.
But that being said, if you roll dice like with character creation, you get what you pay for. If you rolled a bunch of sixes, you got sixes, right? Yeah. Like that's just it. I mean, there's fail safes and whatnot involved, but I tend not to leave plot up to random circumstance or chance. No. Every once in a while, for something like a prophecy or a cryptic riddle to put them on the right level, or someone is gonna get this information. Everyone roll an investigation check, or who's going to be the one that gets the dream first, but it will apply to everyone, right? So it takes the randomness out of it and it makes it just the next plot point. I learned that from Terry, as a matter of fact, who, in Curse of Strahd, there's gallows that you walk by at one point. And one of the characters can see their own corpse.
Yeah, just outside of the village of Barovia before you hit Serval's.
Yeah. He did that to me. And I reacted so strongly to it and was so invested in it that he made a point to add that to just about everywhere we went. There were gravestones with my name on it. There were coffin makers that were sizing it up to exactly my height. Come here for a minute. I just need you to stand and he really laid that out that you are going to die. You specifically. And so that is something that I learned from him, that he took something that was kind of random, could have happened to anybody, and he made it not random.
And to a level, I do that in my Curse of Strahd games. If you don't cleanse the Death House, it follows you.
Nice.
So, you're camping by the side of the road between Yester Hill and the Amber Temple. When you wake up, in the distance, there seems to be a lovely 2-story house, and there seem to be children in front of it waving to you on the side of the road. My players have never gone back in, but they have been stalked by that house. But that's fantastic. I'm going to say, I hope he listens. Terry, from everything I've heard, amazing at what he does, especially given the limited experience he had being thrown into that. Did a phenomenal job from what I can tell. And Terry, kudos to you. So
Terry does two things better than just about anybody else. He listens to his players and he riffs with them. And he is absolutely willing to improv in the moment to give you what you want for now. But he is so good at putting you back on track, right? Like all of his brilliant genius moments are the little details that are so memorable, and he doesn't let you walk too far off the railroad, right? Yeah. But what you do on that railroad and how you interact with it, he is the master, getting right in your face and being there with you for it.
Yeah. So Terry, you sound like a great guy. Love to meet you. If you're ever down my way where it's hot as hell because the world's on fire, I'll buy you a beer. So
how warm is it right now?
It is midnight 30 here, and it's probably 70 or 80 degrees in freedom units. So I don't know
Jeez, that is disgusting.
So I grew up in a place where it was routinely over 100, and then I deployed to the Middle East. Perfect for me, no problem.
I live in a temperate rainforest where it's not even muggy.
Yeah.
Our heat is a little bit different. It's just a little bit like I'm in a rainforest, but it's temperate. I'm never too thirsty. I'm never too sweaty and hot and muggy. I remember stepping out into the Maryland heat for the first
Yeah.
time.
I was going to
And
say, you're going to be here in August. You're fucked.
I did it at the end of June, the first
Yeah.
time I was ever there, and I had to walk 3 blocks from the hotel to the car rental place, and
Yeah.
it looked like I got out of a swimming pool when I walked in there.
I was on a ship that lost 2 of its air conditioners out of 4 while we were in off the coast of Iran. It was 105 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously, inside at night. And you had to have people that came by and woke you up in your bed to do heat stress surveys every 2 hours. The paint was literally melting off the ship. So
That is gross. And you wonder how people just live their lives there. Like it's the cradle of humanity is right there. That's where people came from. How did we fucking survive?
not a clue. Yeah.
Anyway, are we good for this episode? I mean, there's always more to do, but is there anything?
I think we are. I mean, domains of dread are such an interesting thing. They're a little microcosm. They're a wonderful thought experiment. I encourage every DM to go out there and try and build a domain of dread, whether or not you're going to use it or not. Because when you look at all the little restrictions and the difficulties and the hurdles, that is something you can use to improve your own game in your homebrew. If you can overcome it in a domain of dread and you can facilitate your players having a good time in a demi plane of hell, then your, halflings building a catapult to launch a cow over a church or whatever in your high fantasy game will be that much more rewarding and enriching.
If I can be perfectly honest, I will use lots of these little bits and pieces for just world building in general, or for building just any villain. Doesn't have to be a dark lord that's cursed,
right?
Any sort of like set piece NPC. What do they want? What happened? What was their upbringing like? The questions in this are good questions. There's just not enough, and they didn't tell us why we're asking these questions in the first place.
They didn't, and I feel like a point they really should have hammered on, which kind of, when we were originally talking, I had a different topic entirely to discuss, but you covered it in a different episode very well with Dan about the stages of a hero, what defines a hero, backstories, and I bought several of the books you were talking about, and they're wonderful.
Oh, good.
And they really should, in this, discuss, hey, remember, your Dark Lord does not know they're a Dark Lord. In their mind, they're a hero.
Yep.
And I feel like when you're developing a villain or you're developing anybody, everybody believes they're the hero of their own story. And whether it's a small thing that they're the hero of or a big thing, that's going to be the all-encompassing issue of their life is, how did I make this a statement about my heroism because my existential dread demanded that I made a statement that I was here.
And that's it, like the concept of legacy.
Right.
And what that legacy is going to be. I was going to say, when it comes to villains, it's easy to say that every villain sees themselves as a hero, and if that's the only metric that you operate by, that is perfectly fine. That is such a good way to think about villains. But the scariest villains that I ever throw in my games are the ones that realize what they're doing is evil and just want you to feel what they feel. And at that point, that legacy that they're thinking about is not, look at me doing this good thing. It's, at least my suffering isn't suffering alone. At least someone else will see or feel what I see and feel.
Yes. So it is, the villain that is the one we all recognize and is difficult to deal with is the one that believes they're a hero. The villain that is truly dangerous and really gets to us is the artist who is in pain and is struggling with the fact that there is no medium of expression that is perfect enough for them. And the only one they found is, I am going to show my expression. I'm going to make you feel what I feel. And it is going to be horrific. It is like Van Gogh. Van Gogh was tormented because he could not express himself. He was the master of what he did. He was the best at what he did. And even at the pinnacle of his art, he felt this wasn't enough to make somebody else understand what I'm going through. Now you make that a villain, and that's terrifying.
And that's what the torture chamber in Castle Ravenloft is.
Yeah.
Right. Like there are bits and pieces of that littered around, but I've got a handful of examples. Like Hannibal Lecter knows he's evil. He doesn't give a fuck, right? And he wants the scary thing about him is he needs Clarice to understand too, right? When the natural born killers, Mickey and Mallory, they're fucking evil and they know it, but they're here for the ride because they're in it together and they're feeling this together. I wonder if they had been separated, would they have gone on that spree?
Right.
And so that idea of join me in my own personal evil hell is a powerful motivator. But to bring it back to the domains of dread, that's good for a lieutenant, not for a Dark Lord.
Yes. Completely agree.
So I think that's all for our discussion on building a domain of dread.
That was a quick hour. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert, for choosing this topic, for workshopping your homebrew, and for supporting the Patreon.
Happy to do it. I thoroughly enjoy everything you put out, and I'm glad to be able to contribute any way I can.
Well, we appreciate it. And of course, I will be talking to you almost daily, it seems like, on the Discord as well.
Yeah.
For everyone else, thank you for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, www.itsamimic.com, a store with some It's a Mimic merch, and a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. So I've got to save this incredibly long episode on this complete potato of a machine.
Yeah.
So I should sign off here pretty quickly and get that saved. Get that.
Yeah.
But the whole deal with this level of the Patreon is, if you're still interested, if you still want to support us at this level, we do this every 3 months. Just something to talk about. Think about it. Let me know.
Yeah, no, I'm going to try and come up with another good one. I thought I had a good one with character backstories, and I listened to one of your episodes, and you covered everything I was going to talk about. So you bastards got to me before it. I'll admit I was surprised that the question about my name of Terror Pickle did not come up.
I didn't want to necessarily out you because I didn't necessarily out the others that are supported for this. So, but I'm thoroughly curious.
So, well, two things. One, again, back to Fern Gully, my brain just misfires a lot. So a friend of mine was asking what they should name their cat, and they had like Socrates and Galileo because they were a philosophy major. And I said, well, clearly you should name it Pickles the Terror Squid. And it just popped in my head. Pickles the Terror Squid, great name for a cat. And they said, no, we're not going to go with that. And I signed into a video game some time later, and I was like, oh, Pickles the Terror Squid, I'm going to do that. Too many characters. All right,
Pickle it is.
Terror Pickle it is. And I don't think you know this, on Reddit we've conversed. I'm also Shatner Pants.
Oh, that's you. That's we go.
Me. Yeah, and in college I was playing some video game about giant robots because I'm a big mecha fan, and somebody was talking about they'd brought a girl home and she was so drunk she'd shat in her panties, and I heard that, and all I heard was Shatner panties, and I said, oh, Shatner panties, is that what Shatner wears under his Shatner pants? And I was referring to William Shatner.
Of course, yeah.
I had no fucking idea what I was talking about. And his little Shatner pants, just like, oh, that's kind of a funny thing. All right, I'll be Shatner pants and stuff. So